Good evening. I'm Mayor Dean Brookie, and I'd like to welcome you to this regular City Council agenda meeting of August 18th, 2020. It's now about 6:32, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin with a roll call, please.
Councilor Bettine.
Here.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Present.
Councilor Youssef.
Here, happy to be here. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Present.
Mayor Brookie.
Present. Thank you so much. With that, I'd like to identify any actual or perceived conflicts of interest that any of us may have with any of the agendized items this evening. If so, just raise your hand and make it knowledgeable. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is public participation. This section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that do not otherwise appear on this agenda, or those items that might be included in the consent agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. However, citizens should address their comments directly to City Council. Citizens wishing to speak during this section of the agenda shall sign in prior. And so what we have in the virtual format of that is you are waiting in the wings, and just make it known to our facilitator, and Mitchell will let you in if you do have comment to speak during this public participation section. You will have comments are limited to 3 minutes. The city manager, or in this case, the Mitchell, will signal 30 seconds remaining by raising his hand. Any audiovisual materials for your presentation must be provided to the city clerk on or before noon the day of the meeting. So I don't believe we have any audiovisuals this evening. But with that, Mitchell, are there any folks that raising their hands for public participation for any items, again, not on the agenda, or any of those items that might be on a consent agenda as well?
Mayor, we do have a couple people raising their hands. I am going to allow Gunnison to speak first. And I do believe Gunnison has a presentation that he coordinated with the clerk's office prior to the meeting. So, Gunnison.
And I might say that for the speaker that you need to say your name and address for the record, please.
Gunnison, you can unmute yourself and share your screen if you are ready.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gunnison Pagnota, and my address is 8126 Susie Drive, Rye, Colorado. And I'm here representing Goal High School. Is my partner here by chance? Did Pat make it in to the meeting, Patricia? Okay. And Amy, were you going to run the slideshow for me?
I can do that. Give me a second.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. And with that, while he's pulling that up, I just wanted to thank you very much for your 3 minutes of time for me to share Goal High School on behalf of our CEO, Constance Jones, and our entire staff of over 500, and our student body of roughly 5,000 all across the state of Colorado. We are a blended online charter school with a wonderful site in Durango as well.
There we go. Gunnison, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So Goal High School is a statewide charter. Trying to switch. There we go. My partner this evening was going to be Miss Patricia Carter-Senecal. She's an academic coach in the Durango site, and she was not able to get into the Zoom meeting. Our mission is to develop productive members of society. This looks different for every student that we work with. They may be going into the workforce, college or university, and of course, military. Our vision to help all students achieve their full potential in a caring, supportive, and personalized environment means a lot for us to personalize the environment for the student and to personalize their educational plan, which is very difficult to do in much larger school settings. Because we are spread out all over the state, we're able to do that. This is actually a group of students from the Four Corners area. Graduation in 2019, obviously. We were virtual this year, but we are a public charter school. We've been up and operating for about 13 years, a little over 13 years, and we run a blended model. So our curriculum is online, but our sites are very comfortable, very naturally social distanced, and we have 36 from Durango to Sterling to Craig, Trinidad, all over the state. But what's unique about Goal? We are a performance school with the Colorado Department of Education. Of course, we offer the same diploma that any school in the state offers. The site for La Plata County is 3206 Main Street in Durango. We are very cautious at this point to make sure that we're following all COVID-19 protocols. We were also ranked in the top 50 of over 4,000 blended online schools, and we are the only alternative education campus in the world to be called a Microsoft Showcase School. So Microsoft is a very close partner of ours. How does Goal achieve these results? We have a three-phase process: showing up, which in this virtual world is just touching base with your coach every day. Coach is reaching out to students, connecting, building relationships, and based on that, we had a high degree of success with 846 graduates in 2020. What do we provide? Free public education, so a laptop computer, internet hotspots. We have an incredible concurrent enrollment program where we partner with colleges and universities, including Fort Lewis, all across the state. We pay for tuition, books, and fees as early as the freshman year. We have an up-and-coming career and technical education program providing workforce readiness certificates. Our teachers are certified. Our counselors are certified. We have licensed social workers and many levels of social emotional support for our students. One thing that people worry about a lot is the social aspect, and we make sure and provide a lot of opportunities for our students to engage socially with each other, with other Goal students from across the state. We have Goal Ventures field trips that actually go to places like Mount Rushmore and Moab, Utah. They are 4-credit field trips, and so there's a lot of curriculum involved as well. We have Student Council, National Honor Society. Last year we started esports, and we were actually the state champion esport team and the national runner-up in the home gaming league. High school gaming league. And we also have a wonderful music academy, which performs concerts now virtually. Just a little bit of wisdom from Goal students. Being at Goal taught me discipline, integrity, and accountability. Here's from a Durango student, Cody Walton. A lot of change is coming our way. The best way to handle it is to go with it. One dream for his future was to go to India. He wants to learn the ways of the monks. From a Durango graduate, Cody Walton. Our website is goalac.org. And of course, we've got our 1-800 number. We will be accepting enrollments all the way through the month of September. And so students trying out homeschool for the first time, going back to their public school, will still have an opportunity to enroll with Goal High School. And that'll be happening all across the state. And we also have our graduations on the website.
Tony,
Yes.
am I on?
Hi, Pat. I believe you are on.
Yeah,
We're just
I
wrapping
don't
up.
know.
And I think we may
There
be over
couldn't
the
be
3
more.
minutes. How we
Just
doing,
to
Mitchell?
say a piece from the academic coach perspective.
You bet.
The ratio that we work with is for my academic support for all students is 1 to 35. The way that we can personalize is because we have that low ratio. And we can, today I oriented 2 regular students, 1 student with needing support services, accommodations, and 2 gifted students. And it was such an exciting experience because they all had their own reason for coming to Goal, which isn't to say that other
Berkey, I'm
schools
sorry.
aren't perfect for them, for other students. It's just that Goal is very unique. And I'm very pleased to be an academic coach for Goal.
I need to thank you so much for that presentation, and we look forward. We'll put a little more information on our website, and with that, we need to move on to the next party.
Thank you so much for your time.
You
We
bet.
appreciate you.
Uh-huh. Sorry about that, Mitchell. I was on mute and wasn't able to wrap that up as concisely as I should have, but
That's okay.
Feel free to jump in on the next one. Yeah.
We do have a couple others raising their hands. Just a moment. I'm going to allow Paul to speak. Paul, please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Paul Roithmeyer. I reside at 1262 Spring Road in Durango, Colorado. The Neighbors in Need Alliance would like to provide an update on its June 23rd proposal to the City Council to establish a transitional community at Elkview for individuals wishing to transition to independent living. This proposal is in response to the Tier 1 action recommended by the city and county sponsored and approved strategic plan to address homelessness. NINA represents roughly 100 concerned citizens, including 11 faith-based organizations across our community. Our mission is to provide a safe place to sleep for our unhoused community members in need. I wanted to provide an update on some recent activity. NINA surveyed the greater Crestview neighborhood and formulated a set of actions to help achieve resident hopes and address their concerns as they relate to the proposed transitional community. NINA held meetings with Blue Line Development and Housing Solutions for the Southwest to address Blue Line's stated concerns regarding the Aspero development in their July 9 letter sent to the city and county. NINA offered several options to address Blue Line's stated concerns. NINA delayed our update to the city at the request of Housing Solutions so as not to confuse our proposal with theirs. We are running short on time in terms of getting this community up and running. NINA has secured $90,000 in funding from the Colorado Health Foundation. We have identified additional financial resources, for example, emergency shelter grants, Home Aid Colorado, joint sales tax revenue, and possibly CARES Act funding to stand up and staff the camp by the end of the year. All of the above funding sources are time limited, so if we do not expedite the process, we will lose the opportunity to access these resources and provide a safe place to sleep for unhoused individuals in need before winter. We need support from the city to actively facilitate and expedite the process. We're requesting our government partners to confirm our access to the Elkview site by September 30th or sooner if at all possible. More detail on the above was sent to city and county officials last Friday via email. We're requesting the following help from the city. We want to verify NINA is on the city council agenda for the first of 2 public meetings on September 1st. We're requesting an emergency health ordinance to secure access to the Elkview site as soon as possible. We believe such an ordinance will help expedite NINA's mission to provide a safe place to sleep for one segment of the unhoused in our community before winter. It will complement the city and county's action to mitigate health and safety risks associated with COVID-19. It will ensure access to existing funding and facilitate potential funding before it is no longer available. It will drive toward goal number 1 of the city council stated 2019-20 goals to continue to address
Paul, if you can bring this to a conclusion quickly, that would be great. Your 3 minutes is up.
3 more points. A
Yep.
copy of the contingent lease as promised in the July 9th joint city and county meeting, and a letter from Kevin Hall on July 30th. We were expecting this on August 7th, and we'd like to get that as soon as possible. City support to access utilities at the Elkview site, and active support to otherwise expedite the construction of our proposed transition community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but we can, I don't know if we don't want to address this right now, but perhaps there's a time later in our meeting when we can have staff respond to the status of the proceedings there. With that, I'd ask Mitchell to take the next public comment.
We do have a couple more. I am going to allow Doe to speak. Doe, please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Doe. What is this? Getting a reverb here. Okay, can you hear me?
You can
Hello,
go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes, no, if you're 3 minutes up,
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you.
Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Doe Utes. I'm at 101 Ryler Drive, right next to the proposed development. And I've lived there in that neighborhood since '94, and that was still dirt streets, and they were still building the neighborhood. And I guess what I'd really like to say is that the character of that neighborhood was really important for us deciding to buy there. We were told by the developer, the builder, the realtor, that street would not ever connect to another neighborhood. I believed, we thought that was what was on the plat. All three of them were amended saying that the city did not take the offer to use that as a right of way. So that was backing up what we were told. So this is just kind of new to us. But besides that, I'd just like to say that I think that as a city, how we develop our neighborhoods, I'm understanding the connectivity issue. Just looking at our neighborhood, saying that we've got a really nice neighborhood that was established almost 30 years ago. And it would be nice if you guys could just look at the future build out all the way south from the Cummins project and just take a look and see if maybe that can be a connected neighborhood from Florida down to Florida. Leave ours the way it is, and hopefully the kids can go right through an emergency exit, emergency gate at Ryler. It can be used for snow or whatever might have to go through there.
You have
But-
1 minute to go. Thank you.
Thank you. But just to keep the neighborhoods, both neighborhoods, not ours, but also the future ones, connected, yes, but not a thoroughfare, so that everybody's changing the character of a neighborhood where it is more of a community where kids do feel safe, where we feel safe walking. And that's just my hope, is that you give that some consideration, a lot of consideration, to see if we can't come up with something that's connected, but not that way. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Doe. That item is agendized later in our meeting. So this section of public comment is usually for
Sorry.
items that are not agendized later, but we will take your comment and it will be made of record. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Sorry.
Mitchell?
We do have another. I'm going to allow John to speak. John, please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Mayor Brookie, this is John Simpson. I have an item related to consent agenda item 6.8. Would you like to just now, or do you want to hold that for later?
There is no public hearing for that item, so whatever comments would be made relative to a consent agenda item should be made at this point. Thank you.
Okay. I have 3 items of concern related to item 6.8, the appropriation of additional funds for College Mesa Water Treatment Plant. The first is the carryover process. The second is the lack of contract review by council. And the third is the lack of planning related to water treatment. First, you're being asked to approve an increase to the water fund by $533,000. Staff intends to interpret this appropriation to allow for the expenditure of $939,000. Staff continues to cling to this nonsense of the past that allows for carryover of unspent budgets for an unlimited amount of years. Back in April, you adopted an amended appropriation ordinance that defined what staff was allowed to spend. Nothing in that actual ordinance allowed staff to bring forward ghosts of prior administrations. Ordinances should clearly provide the level of spending, not appendices to budgets and appendices to ordinances. Under the current system, there's no control to prevent staff from spending this money on a different project or in some year in the future. This is the perfect opportunity for council to put the carry forward concept to bed by directing staff to ask for an additional appropriation of $933,000, the total amount of the contract. This assumes the entire contract can be completed
1 minute.
in 2020, which doesn't appear likely, with a 5-month lead time. A harmonized budget and appropriating ordinance provides a basic internal control to staff. My second comment is staff already appears to have entered a contract with this vendor, and council had no input into this. Our city is reeling from the financial scandal that resulted from a lax internal control used by previous councils. The simplest way to embezzle is to make deals with contractors and include kickbacks to certain people. This is commonly known as pay to play. Even worse, many times a supervisor will direct a subordinate to make that deal happen, which puts that subordinate in the difficult position of speaking out with the fear of reprisal. Please consider, even though if you don't give approval for this project, there's nothing you could prevent staff from using what they consider previously appropriated money to fund this project. And although you have a forensic audit, I hope you consider implementing these 2 basic internal controls immediately. And finally, staff is well on their way to spend this $1 million
You have 8 seconds.
on the College Mesa's water treatment plant. Excuse me, Dean Brookie, please be quiet, with no plan of how water will be treated in the future. Is all this work going to be torn out during the refurbishment? There's no written plan. This project was planned to be completed 7 years ago. Although this might have been an important project,
Time is up,
It is
Mr.
important.
Simpson. I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank
it
you.
seems that the first step would be to get an engineer on board who can identify.
Anybody else in our queue? Thank you so much. Anybody else in our queue?
I do see someone else. Mark, I'm allowing you to speak. Please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much.
My portion, I really want to comment after they talk about the Cummins property, and there were also 4 people in our neighborhood that want to yield their time. So at this point, I defer to talk to them if that's possible.
Mark, this is not the right time for any comments on the Cummins Annex, if you're speaking to that.
That's what I was just saying. I'll lower my hand till later.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. Mitchell,
We do have quite a few attendees in our meeting tonight. If John Simpson is raising his hand again, Mayor, how do you want to proceed with that?
if he's got another topic, he has had 3 minutes significantly. So I think unless it's identified as another topic, I think we move on.
Would you like me to allow him to speak to see if it is another topic?
Correct, please.
John, I am allowing you to speak. Please unmute yourself.
No, that must have been a mistake on that hand raise.
Okay. Are there anybody else in the attendee list who wishes to speak during public participation? Nobody is raising their hand, so I believe we can move on.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. With that, we have a Our next item would be proclamations and presentations, of which we have none this evening. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the City Council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item to be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 8 this evening. With that, I'd like to have a reading of the consent agenda. Amy Phillips, if you'd engage us, thank you.
Certainly. Items 6.1 through 6.6 are approval of minutes. 6.1, study session from July 14th, 2020. 6.2, regular meeting of July 21, 2020. 6.3, study session of July 28, 2020. 6.4, special meeting of August 4th, 2020. 6.5, special meeting of August 6th, 2020. Items 6.6 through 6.8 are discussion and possible action items. 6.6 concerns approval of Resolution R 2020-22, authorizing additional appropriation to the general fund for the Colorado Department of Law post-grant and proposed project cost in excess of the amount budgeted in the 2020 budget. 6.7 concerns approval of Resolution R 2020-23 for an additional appropriation to the general fund for the Colorado Department of Transportation High Visibility Enforcement Grant in excess of the amount budgeted in the 2020 budget. 6.8 concerns Resolution R 2020-24, authorizing supplemental appropriation to the Water Fund and the Water Capital Projects Fund for College Mesa Water Treatment Plant electrical upgrades, project number 1071. Items 6.9 and 6.10 are final approval of ordinances. 6.9 is ordinance O 2020-11 for purposes of amending the zoning of real property located within the city of Durango, Colorado, pursuant to Chapter 27, Section 6-3-2-3 and 2-1-2-6 of the Code of Ordinances, the city of Durango, and declaring an effective date. The GA rezone, and 6.10 is ordinance O 2020-12 for purposes of amending zoning of real property located within the city of Durango, Colorado, pursuant to chapters 27, section 6-3-2-3 and 2-1-2-6 of the Code of Ordinances, city of Durango, and declaring an effective date, and that's the Waymire rezone.
Dean, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. And with that, is there any item that any counselor would like to have removed from this consent agenda?
I would like to remove item 6.8, the discussion and possible action concerning a resolution authorizing a supplemental appropriation to the Water Fund and Water Capital Projects Fund for College Mesa Water Treatment Plant electrical upgrades.
Fair enough. Any other items? Any counselors? Okay, with that, we will pull 6.8 from the discussion, and may I have a motion, I'd entertain a motion to pass the consent agenda with the exception of 6.8.
I'll move to pass the agenda with the exception of 6.8.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, and may we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
and Mayor Brookie.
Yes. Thank you so much. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is removed consent agenda items. So Kim, what would you like to understand about that or present to the public?
Well, there's a couple of things that I wanted to discuss. One of them is this conversation about this, as far as I know, has not been had with the Infrastructure Advisory Board. So even though they are the ones who like recommend what projects come forward, they're not aware that this particular project has this additional situation attached to it. So I would like to request that in the future, when something this significant, for example, is being submitted to council, that conversation be had with the appropriate boards. The other question I had, and Jared I see is here, maybe he could answer this one, or maybe he wants to wait till the end and just write them all down. I was wondering when this is actually going to take place, when it's scheduled for. I was also concerned that we went ahead and engaged in a contract for purchase of an item that's that hasn't been appropriated for. So that concerns me, and I don't think that's our policy, but maybe that's something we need to talk about when we talk about capital policy, capital project policies in the near future. The other concern I had was the contingency is listed at 10%, but the actual dollar amount of the contingency isn't listed, so that comes out to $85,403. And the contingency concept is something that we also have on our agenda to discuss as far as how we define a contingency, what it gets used for, how much they actually should be. And one of the things I would like to propose tonight is that this contingency, until we have that conversation and agree to what that looks like, that the contingency be reduced to 2%. And if there's more than that necessary, the utilities, the water fund can come back to us and request another appropriation. I'm going to imagine we have that conversation before that's necessary, since this project's not going to happen in the next month. So those are my recommendations on that at this point.
I also have a few questions.
Barbara, please. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So my questions are, we talk about coming back for unanticipated appropriations, and this $533,000 expenditure, I didn't see it in the 2020 CIP budget request. So I found that curious that all of a sudden mid into the year, we have a unanticipated $500,000 request that looks like a add-on to a project. So I have a concern about that. We still don't have a balance from finance department in the water fund, and we've been asking for that. I've been asking for that for some time, and what other requirements might need to be used for that fund. And then I'm particularly interested, because I am interested in addressing the College Mason water treatment facility, because I think that's needed. But I'd like to know how this is going to coincide with other CIP projects that will address the needs of College Mesa. And finally, I do have a concern about appropriating something of this size so late in the year where I don't anticipate it being done. And like Councilor Baxter, I do have a concern with going forward with a contract that seemingly hasn't gone through the process with the advisory board or other notifications. So I might actually make a suggestion that we make a continuance of this decision. It doesn't seem like it has to be made immediately, and that we could maybe get more information under both the process and a little more information, and also get the input from the advisory board.
Okay, I might ask Jared if I might ask staff to help us out a little bit and advise us as to a couple of those issues. One is
no, Dean first.
Thank you. Sorry, it's always
I'm sorry. I didn't see you, Melissa.
Probably, I don't know where I am in your screen.
Yeah.
I also would, as we go through this, when we go through this, I think Councilor Noseworthy is her idea of a continuance might be a wise one, because this could be a longer discussion, more so than in a consent agenda format. Because I am curious in addressing some of the issues that Mr. Simpson raised of, about the project itself and whether we will be able to complete this next year. I'm sure, Jared, you probably have that information for us, but I'd love to kind of get that information as well. Kind of information. I also am intrigued by this project and the improvement to the College Mesa plant. I'm interested in learning more as well at the appropriate time when you guys think that might be.
Any other questions from council? I'm not adverse to the idea of delay. Jared, I'd like to hear from you in terms of what that might mean for the construction schedule, if in fact there was seasonal issues that brought this before us this evening. And secondly, has the advisory board not been aware of this previously? And thirdly, what is best practices in the construction industry for contingency? And I can help with that, which is my experience is 10% is a minimum contingency to be associated with virtually any construction project, especially a municipal project of any case. And a 2% contingency simply is a disruption of the construction process and project flow. Any contractor entering into an agreement would assume and include in that contract that there is a 10% owner's contingency. So with that, Jared, do you have any additional thoughts?
Good evening, counselors. I will try to get through all these questions. I think I've crystallized them on the page, but please correct me wherever I get them wrong. First off, a couple things. At the beginning of the year, we did have in the carry forward budget that was published both in December and again that council considered later on in the year during the corrections. There was a listed project, this listed project of a carry forward value of $423,000 and $200. So we were proceeding at that point, and again, as I put in the agenda doc, this has been a long-running project with the original appropriation in 2013. There was an additional appropriation in the budget of 2015, and for most of those years, we had been conducting smaller phases of work that I described while we conducted the engineering to put all of the electrical systems, kind of renew all the electrical systems throughout the plant. We actually had to discontinue our contract with our original electrical engineer. That happened just last fall. We had to get another electrical engineer on board, get them up to speed with the drawings and other things that we had from the previous engineer. And that's how we got to where we're at today. We finished those electrical engineering drawings. We put them out to bid, and that is where we put that out to bid, and we got responses back from bidders on the 4th of this month, I believe. And so, or it actually may have been, yeah, I think it was the 4th. I'm mixing the 4th and the 8th. So we moved forward with, going ahead. We know the generator has a long lead time. We know regardless of whoever would have won that award, that we would need that generator. So we went ahead and said, okay, we're gonna need this generator. Let's move that piece forward. We wanted to self-procure that. That way we avoid markup. Generally that markup would have been anywhere from $31,000 to $55,000, from 10 to 15% on contractor markup. And we want to make it able to actually get the work done this year as well. This will go into 2021. I'm not going to say it's going to be absolutely done by the end of the year, but we don't put anything under contract without having the full amount of funding available to move that project forward. That's why I put this in front of you this evening, is because our bids came back. The installation of all of this equipment came back at, I don't have the number right in front of me. I think it's on the agenda doc, what the bid was from Durango Electric to do this work. And so this is kind of a outgrowth of this being appropriated a long time ago. We're cleaning up all of our CIPs, and I think that both Levi and I have done a lot of work to try to identify money that we're going to use immediately, and get away from multiple year appropriations wherever we can avoid them. And so this project, I'm trying to move it forward because one, it is needed improvement. It will not inhibit potential other rehab, and frankly, it's actually needed at this point in time. That way we can turn off pieces of the plant without turning it all off and do work on them. And it is also moving forward a couple of our other goals to have backup generation that we currently don't have. If we don't have electricity from LPAA, we can't make water. And also to potentially tap this resource of a photovoltaic field as part of the McKinstry process as well. Barbara, I see you.
Yes.
I see you.
Jared, I appreciate the thought. And I think for me, because we're going through this CIP policy that we've worked through that calls for any unspent funds coming back to council for approval, I would feel more comfortable if a couple of things. If you actually came back to us in short order and said, what we really need, we haven't spent this money. It needs to go back to the city council. And what we're really asking for is 980 some thousand. So we followed the process that we're trying to put in place, which is that money isn't automatically just rolled over. It comes back to council, it goes in the pot, council considers it. So for me, I would be more comfortable if you came back to us following this process that we're trying to put in place. Two, if we could have the fund balance and the public had it, so we knew, we think we have it, you're telling us, but I haven't seen a fund balance. And three, I would, prior to any discussion, would like to see the process. It may be legal, but it may not be best practice. It may be of contracting before a project has been approved. So I would feel more comfortable with you coming back to us in a ask or a request that follows the CIP policy we're very soon to put in place.
I might say the allegation that there is a contract in place, there's been no signed contract, I would assume at this point. Is that true, Jared?
That is correct, Mayor Brookie. We have not signed the agreement with Durango Electric to do the install. We have ordered a generator, and frankly, that generator we can have sitting around until we can get, we can let out another bid. I would be concerned because we have gone out to bid with all the electrical drawings, and we got responses to those. And to simply kind of drop those responses and wait for another phase, that is why we are asking for an additional appropriation, because we had $423,000 available at the beginning of the year. We don't have enough to complete the full project, right? We have enough to buy the generator today. And that's why we wanted to come back to council and ask you all the question of, are you okay with us, getting an additional appropriation and moving ahead with this project? The outcome, if it were delayed, we would immediately go to Durango Electric and say, are you guys okay holding your pricing for us? And they may say yes or no. We could get the generator on site and we could put it back into the CIP process as a different project or the same project anew for the new year. But again, that delay will likely cost us. And that's why we want to be upfront. We want to be clear with council. I wanted to show you everything we're doing. And again, Mayor Brookie is correct. We have not signed on the dotted line with Durango Electric because we do not sign on the dotted line unless we know we have an appropriation from council to cover all of the costs.
Jared,
Jared,
may I ask a question?
I didn't actually hear the request to delay this project. What I heard was a request to request money in a different manner such that it reflected the entire project rather than a portion of it. So I think that could happen again in 2 weeks. I didn't hear a request to put the project off. So I just wanted to to say I haven't heard.
Good clarification, Kim. Chris?
Jared, I just wanted to understand, you mentioned in your presentation there that the previous contractor had to stop, or you asked them to stop. What was the reason for that? I didn't quite understand that.
So Chris, frankly, the project languished. We had multiple projects with the same electrical engineering firm. And they kind of came to an impasse with us on another project and did not complete this project as a result. We asked them to go ahead and complete the scope of work that they had signed their contract for. And again, last year, they decided that they wanted to terminate the contract instead of moving forward. So that's why, we made sure that we got everything we paid for out of that portion of the contract with that previous electrical engineer. We gave that, again, to a new electrical engineer and had to kind of, again, get them up to speed and to get them to finish the plans. Pretty much.
So as a follow-up to that, with that previous contract, if they'd followed through with that, you wouldn't have needed to ask for this additional appropriation ostensibly because you had a contract with them that covered the 423 or whatever it was.
I don't think that would be fully accurate, Chris. That was for the design. And so we would have put that design out to bid. It would have gone out to bid earlier, obviously. But it would have come back and we would still be, theoretically asking the same questions. We would say, how much does it cost? How much do we have in available appropriations? And how much more do we need? Do we want to wait until the new year and a new CIP process to move this forward? Or do we want to try and get the ball rolling earlier and approach council for a supplemental appropriation?
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
And the other question I had, Jared, was had either this or a previous advisory board reviewed this scope of work? The allegation was that nobody's ever seen this.
Excuse me just for a minute, Jared. It was not an allegation, number one.
I'm not talking about yourself. I'm talking about one of our citizens that made that allegation. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Jared?
So this project, as I said, has been a long-standing one on our books with the advisory board, receiving quarterly reports at least since my tenure started. But I did mention that this was out to bid at the last IAB meeting, but we hadn't received those bids back. So it had been in front of them, but it had not been called to their attention, so to speak. I would agree with that.
Did a previous advisory board review this project for advancement a number of years ago then? Or is it in terms of they approved the design effort? So I assume that that they knew that this project was happening and suggested it be included in the CIP. Is that not true? Or?
So I can't speak to how it was done particularly with the advisory boards prior to my tenure. And this project is one of those that extends past my tenure. But I can say that since I have been working diligently, and I hope it's bearing fruit to make sure the IAB is apprised of our progress on projects, be it through our quarterly reports. We did make sure that the IAB was given all of our carry forward projects that appeared in the adopted budget this year as well. It's an ongoing process. We'll continue to improve. But again, maybe it is one of these things that wherever we do have the opportunity, I do try to call it to their attention, and I should double down on that.
And I will say, as the liaison to the Infrastructure Advisory Board, you're doing a great job and you're making major progress from the way it was even a year ago, as far as understanding and presenting information. But my recollection was not that the advisory board was informed that this would be something that would need an additional appropriation. And I think that that's the part of the conversation that I was referring to, that not that the project itself hadn't been moving along toward this, but that now that you have the bid, there would have to be an additional appropriation, that it wasn't actually included in the original dollars that they had recommended the council spend.
With that, I might ask, what would satisfy council's concerns relative to the IAB's concurrence with this appropriation? Would we want a letter from the chair or a motion from them in the future or something of that nature? Or are we accepting of the situation as it is presented this evening?
Well, I would like to see us following the proposed CIP policy, which would mean that, you know, we recognize that 430 thousand comes back and the new request is for the 900,000. So that would be one. And I would also like to know, like I said earlier, how much the full accounting for the fund balance in the water fund. And I mean, I'm talking, again, I'm not talking delaying it. I understand the importance. I just think that the IAB may have been thinking they had a $430,000 project and now it's a $900,000 project. And so I just want to make certain that we're starting to implement the policy we've worked to put in place. So I would look at coming back in 2 weeks, or Jared, if there was urgency and you needed to bring it to council in another sooner, I would entertain, you know, a quick meeting to discuss that, but I'd like to have that information provided.
Thank you, and good points. I'd entertain a motion on this issue. It has been suggested that there will be a continuance, and I'll ask our city attorney whether that requires a vote or if that simply can be continued, if that is, or if that needs to be continued by motion.
I would suggest you make a motion and then provide guidance. What you would like to see bringing it back.
There you have it. We have options to approve this request, to disapprove this request, or thirdly, to continue this request. If that happens, I would suggest a specific date so that Jared can tactfully inform his low bidder.
Can I ask a quick question of Jared? Jared, if a couple weeks, if you can come back to us again, is that delay going to cause you challenges with accepting your bids or getting the job done with the contractors? Can we get this back on our agenda in a couple weeks and approve it with the additional information that's being asked for by the counselors?
Councilor Bettine, I believe we can. You know, we always run a little bit of risk by, you know, them trying to get other work, but again, 2 weeks shouldn't be too much to keep them busy. You know, we do a lot of work with Durango Electric. You know, they're a great local company, and so I would hope that we could maintain the bid for a couple more weeks. I would be very hesitant if it was going to be but much longer than that. So I'm happy to try and get you whatever other information you would like. Ask, you know, eliminate the funding that we do have in the carry forward and ask for, you know, the full project amount. However you would like us to pursue it. You know, again, I tried to be clear in the agenda doc on what we were doing. You know, and if I need to do something different, please let me know.
I think that would be great, Jared. It's just that we're in this strange phase of redoing this policy. It hasn't been done yet. So we're in this bit of a gray period. So your assistance in trying to get us to where we hope to be would be helpful.
Great. Thank you.
I'm willing to move that we make this a continuance to be brought on the agenda with two weeks from now. And help me out if I don't get all the items, but I think we would like to see it brought back in alignment with the CIP policy, which is that the unspent funds would be assumed to come back and you would be asking for the full amount of a new project to be appropriated. I still would like to see the fund balance And I don't know if there's still a requirement to engage with the IAB. I would look to Counselor Baxter for that.
So you need to end your motion and the rest of its discussion?
Oh, okay. And to involve the IAB to make certain that they're aware of this revised, this new project.
So is that part of your motion?
Yes, because the mayor asked for the conditions under the continuation, what information needed to be provided.
It's a little lengthy, but I think I got it all. Kim, do you have a thought on that?
Well, we need to either second it or let it die for lack of second before we have a discussion. So I'll second it, but then I would say that I would amend it because the IAB doesn't have a meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Jared, but we don't have a meeting in the next 2 weeks.
That is accurate, Mayor Pro
So
Tem
there
Baxter.
wouldn't be any way to fulfill that part of the motion. And
Unless we had a serial meeting, which Dirk will cringe at.
I think that would be better not done. So personally, I would suggest we amend the motion for that part of it. I agree that the fund balance should be easy to provide in that 2 weeks, but that would you be willing to amend your motion, Barbara,
Absolutely.
because I think Jared would intend then to bring this forward and mention it to the IAB for this project and then any other projects in the future. That would be my thought. So you have a motion and a second. Dean, do you want any other discussion?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out if, Amy, do you have enough there to identify the motion without the, okay, it's been moved and seconded. So maybe we have a roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Brookie.
Yes. So thank you for that. And we have item 9, public hearings. We have item 9.1, which is a legislative and public related hearing, which is a public hearing for the Cummins annexation, initial zoning, and conceptual development plan review. And maybe we have a staff report, please.
Hi, I don't think that anyone can see me. This is Mark Williams.
You're dark.
It says the host has asked you to start your video. Okay. There we go.
Much better.
I turned off my video. Okay, hello, Mayor Brookie and counselors. Mark Williams from the Community Development Department. And this is the review of the Cummins annexation, initial zoning, and conceptual development plan. So let me share this, and hopefully it won't take too long. Okay, can everybody see?
We're good.
Okay. This is the location of the project. It's on Florida Road, just west of the intersection of Colorado Avenue and Florida Road, south of Ryler Park, and on the east side of the Folsom Place neighborhood. So a little background, there's a lot of process in this type of review. It includes an annexation and initial zoning of plan development, and this is the conceptual plan approval. At this stage, we're not delving into the final engineering and design details or the designs of the houses. That comes at the next stage. This is really meant to evaluate the general development features. So 2 really big features that do need to be resolved in the conceptual study are density and access, and another is whether or not the utilities for the site will work. At least 2 more public hearings will occur after this hearing, and those will be at the preliminary plan stage. Planning Commission reviewed this plan at its June meeting and approved the request by a 4-0 vote. The reason there's such a long delay between Planning Commission and City Council has to do with state statutes that require an extra waiting period for annexations. The access for this project is proposed to be into Ryler Park on Ryler Drive and then also onto Colorado Avenue. The plan is in a future land use designation of medium density residential, which would allow up to 50 units. However, the applicants have planned up to 37 single family and patio homes and townhouses. That's not a final number. It could be slightly less, but at this stage, we should determine that 37 would be the maximum number of units allowed, which works out to a density of about 8.85 units per acre. And the way the development has been planned is to place the townhouses, which are the higher density housing, along Florida Avenue, and the lower density single family and patio homes along the existing neighborhood property lines with Ryler Park and Folsom. So I'll just go real quickly and briefly through the process to make sure that everyone understands. This is a conceptual plan. That's number one. The PD has 3 stages: conceptual, preliminary, and final. So as I just mentioned here, we're doing the big overview to see if this project can work in terms of density and access, general code compliance, the annexation agreement, detailed engineering plans, and fair share. This project is subject to fair share, would occur at the next stage, and council would see the details for that in the revised plans. Most annexation is done at this stage, and there are a number of general state required criteria that must be met. These are things such as, does the property have the proper contiguity? It has to have at least 1/6 of its border share with the city limit, which it does. Also, is it serviceable by city utilities or city services, which it is? Is it compatible with the existing surrounding area, which the city believes it is? This is detailed in the Planning Commission staff report, so I won't go into any more detail unless you have any other questions about that. And this is also the point at which we do the initial zoning, and that is PD. This is the future land use map. The subject parcel is a little hard to see, but it's got the bright green outline at Colorado and Florida. That color that it's masking is the lighter brown. So just to the south, those 3 lots are medium density residential, as well as this parcel. The lighter yellow to the east and north is lower density residential. Most of the new projects that have been occurring on Florida include Silverview townhomes, medium density, not directly on Florida, but just right off the Jameson townhomes, medium density. And then farther to the south, there's been a little bit of construction on O'Brien Drive with new townhomes, patio homes, I believe. So the zoning is not zoned. It's in unincorporated La Plata County. It's an enclave. But its neighbors to the north and to the northeast are all part of the Ryler Park PD, and then single family zoning to the west. There's a single family house on this parcel here, which is also in unincorporated La Plata County. It's a little unusual process because the same owner, Mr. Cummins, owned, and his family owned this parcel as well as these 2 parcels. And for many years, the city has hoped and maybe tried a little bit to see if we could have all these parcels developed at once. However, these people are not interested in doing that. So, obviously that's their prerogative. And we're not going anywhere. So maybe in 25 years, this parcel will be next up for development. So this is the site plan, and it's a conceptual site plan, and I just want to clarify that I'm showing this for reference purposes, and this could change. A detailed site plan like this is not required at the conceptual phase. This is really more of a preliminary plan phase, but it does show you what is likely to get built if the project is approved, and This is the intersection on Colorado Avenue. This is the intersection into Ryler Drive. These are the lower density homes that I referenced, and then patio homes, and then the higher density townhouses along Florida Road. There's also the applicants, their architect is Tracy Reynolds, has designed the site plan so that there is adequate open space. There's a ratio contained in our land use code, and the proposed plan meets that ratio of open space that's been provided. And then detention is up here in the northwest corner. The lot flows from right to left as you're looking at the map, so east to west, and then also to the north. So that was the natural place to locate the detention. And we can come back to this screen if anyone has questions about it. Diving into the bigger issues, probably the biggest issue is access and connectivity. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 points of access, which are Ryler Drive and Colorado Avenue. This project needs to have 2 points of connectivity. For one, it's important for city services and for fire access to have both of those points, whether it's recycling and trash collection, or especially for snowplows. Snowplows have a hard time if there's not a through street, or if there's not a cul-de-sac, which is wide enough for the snowplows to turn around. And when an applicant or any developer wants to do infill housing, if we build cul-de-sacs to the city standards, infill projects tend to be fairly small. So those cul-de-sacs take up a lot of the buildable space, and through access tends to be a better solution in terms of getting more housing units built, and the more housing units that get built, the cheaper the prices can be. Something that is an important part of this project is the development of Ryler Park to the north. Ryler Park was approved in 1993, and let me go back up to that site plan. There's a tract of land right here. This is Ryler Park, and this is Ryler Drive. So this is off the southern tip of Ryler Drive, and this is the Cummins property. This tract of land was designed so that at some point in the future, Ryler Drive, would connect to whatever was built here. And in fact, this piece of land was given to the city, transferred to the city in 1993. So we've owned it for the last 27 years with the clear intent of having this be a future right-of-way to join Ryler Drive and the new road to the south. One of the reasons the city really wants to have Ryler Drive as the point of access is that connectivity is a code requirement in the LUDC. It's also a comprehensive plan policy, as I put in the agenda documentation, and it's a standard design principle for urban areas. More direct access not only is a benefit to city services and fire protection, it also benefits pedestrians by having more direct connections, and that includes children who cannot drive. So the Ryler Park access is the most compliant access point in terms of complying with city codes. At the Planning Commission stage, the applicants did a preliminary traffic study, which, according to their numbers, showed that the peak AM rush hour would add 8 additional vehicles from this proposed neighborhood into Ryler Park. And then the peak PM, or afternoon, evening rush, there would be 6 additional vehicles traveling from our transiting through Ryler Park into the neighborhood. So as I mentioned earlier, we do not want to have one access. So, there's a combination of access points, and Ryler Park is the most compliant of those. Colorado Avenue is also more compliant than the Florida access. get into that in just a second as well. As I said, Colorado Avenue and Florida Avenue were both considered as points of access into this neighborhood. The city engineering division determined that Colorado is preferable to Florida as a point of access. And these are some of the reasons that they listed. One is that stacking may be an issue during the morning rush, and that's for turning movements in and out of the new neighborhood. However, stacking should primarily be on Colorado for vehicles merging onto Florida. In other words, cars, maybe parents drop their children off at Riverview Elementary, they're driving down Colorado and they get close to Florida. So we'll be stacking there in the mornings and in the after school rush, but it's an inconvenience and not a hazard. The city could require that a dedicated left turn and then by default right turn lane from Colorado turning onto Florida be built to help with the traffic flow and reduce conflicts. This would result in probably some of the on-street parking close to Florida that is located on Colorado being removed in order to make that extra turn lane. That's something that will have to be determined at the preliminary plan review stage. And another reason that we prefer having access onto Colorado is that Florida is an arterial. It's a very, very busy street. It takes traffic from a lot of neighborhoods in the city as well as La Plata County into the city and Colorado. Although it is busy twice a day, it has much less traffic. And that's a general principle that when possible, it's generally the better idea to have intersections on the lower traffic streets. Some more reasons, most turns onto Colorado from project expected to be right turns out. That will minimize left-to-left turn conflicts. Speeds limited for most traffic movements at the intersection. In other words, for all the turns, the speeds are likely to be reduced because vehicles will either be approaching a stop sign before they have to stop and then turn, or they will have made a turning movement, say from Florida onto Colorado, so they won't have a chance to gain much speed before turning left into the new neighborhood. So that might be a little confusing, but that's what that means. A more detailed traffic study was done for the for this council meeting. So we actually had a very preliminary traffic study done and then another more detailed, but still fairly preliminary traffic study that was available for this meeting. And some of the findings from that traffic study are, try not to get into too much engineering jargon, but traffic engineers like to talk about the level of service. The level of service is A through F. The higher or closer to the beginning, so level of service A is the best, it's free flowing. You don't have to wait at multiple traffic signals to get through. And Florida is an arterial in our traffic standards. Anything down to a level of service D is considered acceptable. So according to the traffic study, by 2035, there will be a level of service D. By 2040, some turning movements would have a level of service E, one level below D. In real terms, that means that someone turning would have to wait about an extra 3 seconds at level of service E as compared to level of service D. However, I think it's important to bear in mind that the city does not have a standard time frame for conducting these traffic studies. The engineers use a 20-year time frame because that's what CDOT does. Other jurisdictions in other states vary their time frames anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So if this project gets built out and we get close to that level of service E, there could be other means by then to reduce or improve the traffic flow, including another connection onto Florida if those lots to the south are ever built or possibly even a signalized intersection. The traffic study supports the city's policy of limiting curb cuts, especially along arterial streets. More curb cuts cause more turning movements, which decreases traffic safety. The reason for that is the differential in speed between a fast car and a slow car is when many accidents happen, especially when drivers are distracted. So the more turning movements we can get off our arterials, the safer they will be. The new intersection for this project, the one that goes onto Colorado, the southeastern edge is 122 feet from Florida. Our code calls for a minimum separation of 125 feet, so it's close. It's possible it could be re-engineered to meet that 125-foot standard, but either way, it is not a big variance from the city's adopted standards, and that's something that the city engineer can grant administratively. The reason for that is because many neighborhoods are already built, and so when new construction is built, you have to deal with the previously existing or already existing configuration of streets and intersections, and sometimes the options are limited as to what to do. The study also looked at traffic accidents at the intersection of Colorado and Florida. They went back 10 years and found that 5 accidents were reported to the police department. So among those accidents, 3 resulted from driver inattention and 1 resulted from a car sliding on ice. So 1 car sliding in 10 years. So if access is the big issue for the Ryler Park neighbors, one of the big issues for the Folsom Drive neighbors or Folsom Place neighbors is sewage. There has been a history of sewage backups in that neighborhood, and that's really because the lines there are flat. If you don't have enough slope, there's not enough flow, which leads to the backups. The city asked the applicant to do a analysis to see what the impact of the new project would be at full build out on the sewer line, which would go from the Cummins property all the way down through Island Cove Mobile Home Park and across the river. And the study found that it's not really a capacity issue. The sewer line does get smaller when it gets closer to the Island Cove Mobile Home Park and goes from, I believe, 8 inches to 6 inches. But even then, the system would operate at 70% of peak capacity, which is considered an acceptable level by our utilities department. The utilities department is aware of the flat lines, and it's on their, I don't know if they have a special list, but they're aware of the project, and they do get called out to clean out the lines occasionally. And so even though there would be 37 more units, there shouldn't be any additional sewage backups because of those additional units. Another issue for Folsom is the presence of fill dirt on the Cummins property. That fill dirt was added earlier, I guess it's the previous decade now, early in the previous decade when the River House Child Daycare Center was built on the other side of Florida. The applicant will need to determine what the height of that fill is. The reason for that is the city requires building height to be measured by the original grade. So if the original grade is 6,500 feet and the new elevation is 6,505, that means that either the new houses that are built on that 5-foot increase would have to be 5 foot lower than would normally be allowed, or they will have to remove that fill to get to the original height. I think that the applicants are anticipating if there's a lot of fill, they will reduce the height of the proposed houses and have walkout basements on the west side of these houses. So in other words, the east side faces Colorado and the main street. You would walk into your house and then you would walk down a flight of stairs and walk out the basement to the west towards the Folsom Park neighborhood. I wanted to show this. I thought it was, a good reflection of human nature. On the left is a petition that was signed by basically every resident in the Ryler Park neighborhood opposing access from the new project through their neighborhood. And they had various concerns about it. When the Ryler Park neighborhood was proposed in 1993, the existing neighbors also signed a petition against the Ryler having access through their neighborhood from the Ryler Park project for many of the same reasons, although they didn't want it to affect their property values, which is not a reason I heard from the Ryler Park neighbors. So in summary, the project proposal complies with city and state annexation criteria, our zoning requirements and conceptual PD standards. And as explained in a little bit more detail in the agenda documentation, it advances comp plan goals that call for efficient land use. So infill, not sprawl. We get housing in the city, not 20 miles, 15, 10 miles outside of the city, which increases traffic on our streets. It provides more diverse housing types and would provide or build connectivity to the existing street network. And this is a recommended motion. Sorry, I don't think I'll read the entire thing. It's the same as is in the agenda documentation. And the recommendation is for approval. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mark, yeah, just one question. That Ryler Park connection, you said it was given to the city. City accepted ownership in 1993.
Correct.
Under what conditions? You said that it was always intended to extend into Ryler Drive, but when I looked at that, there was some consideration that it was only accepted for utilities only, and that there was a commitment by the city. It's been suggested that there was a commitment by the city that would never be used for access. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Right. So the second part of your question is the commitment. And that's not something I had ever heard before working on this project. And Mark and Doe can correct me if I'm wrong, but what they told me was that was conveyed to them by the realtor and the project developer, but not by anyone associated with the city. And as far as the conveyance of that land as right of way, there is a note on the plat that says it's intended. There is one that says it's intended to be used as easement, so you're correct. There's also a note that says it's also intended to be used as public right of way.
Public right-of-way has multiple uses, one of which is utilities. So yeah, nothing that says it was for vehicular access is what I'm concerned about.
Okay.
I can open it up. Was there any presentation by the developer at this point? Seeing none, open a public hearing relative to this issue and ask.
Brookie, I believe you may have, is Elizabeth Boone representing the project, Mark?
Yeah.
I believe she had raised her hand, and I don't know if Mitchell saw that and was able to let her in.
Yeah, absolutely. Ms. Boone, is there anything you'd like to express at this point? You'll have an opportunity to address questions as well, but if there's anything you'd like us to know.
Excellent. Well, Mark did a great job, so I'll try to be brief. I'm Elizabeth Boone with Reynolds Ash and Associates. We're at 1140 Main Avenue. And I want to thank Council for the opportunity to share this conceptual site plan tonight. This project came to our office 5 years ago for a different developer. So we've had the benefit of testing many different options, including a cul-de-sac and a T-bone configuration. We feel that the option you're being presented with tonight is the greatest and best use as it achieves the following. So number one, pedestrian and vehicular connectivity as directed by planning staff and supported by the Planning Commission. Number two, a mix of unit types per staff direction, including single-family homes, patio homes, and townhomes. Number three, it locates each of those unit types in relationship to the context. So you have single-family one-story walkouts along Folsom, single-family two-story units at the rear of Miller, and then 1, 2, and 3-story patio and townhomes along Florida Road and the undeveloped lot. Number 4, as allowed, the density could be up to 12 units per acre. This could be realized as an apartment or condo building, but being sensitive to the context, we've arrived at 8.8 units per acre, which will make a significant contribution to much needed housing within a desirable and developing area of Durango. So a few items to note regarding the site plan. Per code requirements, there's a 25 rear setback for lots adjacent to Folsom. You have a 20-foot setback for lots adjacent to Miller. Troutner has drilled the site to determine the amount of fill. We don't have those results back yet, but we anticipate about 3 feet maximum. And per code, we would like to request 1 vacation rental per block face for a total of 4. So thank you for your time. Myself and Steve from Set Engineering are available to take any questions that may arise.
Thank you. I'll hold my question on, actually, vacation rentals, it's a density issue. Is that included in the 37 units, or would those vacation rentals be additional? I assume they're
included.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. With that, I'll open the public hearing and see if Mitchell has any folks in the wings.
I do see a couple people who have raised their hands. I am allowing Mark to speak, and I know that he arranged ahead of time to make a presentation as well. So Mark, you can unmute yourself and share your screen at this time.
Okay, and I believe there's some of the neighbors, Dickman, Stone, Trout, and Perry, offered to yield their 3 minutes, so that we have a total of 15 minutes. At this point, I'd like to put a presentation on.
And for council to know, I'd just like to engage Mr. Saffer because of this unique situation as an annexation and involving a significant number of our members of our community, that this would be an efficient way to condense their public comment into one presentation, if that's approvable with council. If so, we'll let Mark proceed.
Thank you. As Mark Williams stated, one of our major concerns is the access coming through Ryler. The petition, this is the full petition from the Ryler group, and I know Mark put up the other petition, but at the time Ryler was built, there was no other place for Ryler to connect to. Colorado was the through street. There wasn't the option to go up to Florida. Florida Road was redeveloped to have a center turn lane according to the AASHTO standards, which allows for stacking up for left-hand turns. For right-hand turns, it's easy to hold the traffic. The traffic study also quotes the number of cars coming in and out. The question that we have is, how many cars are realistically going to be in that neighborhood, the amount of parking provided in that neighborhood. And if you look at the 2 maps here, this is what Mark showed. Here's the Ryler Park residential portion and the proposed development. This is the plan that was put up during the planning session. And one of the things we noted during the planning session, It was talked about Ryler Park eventually continuing down through the trailer park to the end of the Y to connect to Florida, and I'll show that in a minute. But the open space that's planned right here, and I hope everybody can see my mouse, if Ryler Park were extended, the open space would disappear. Track E at this point also is where the snow gets stacked up when plowing the Ryler Park neighborhood. The people who live here, and when you actually walk out to the site, who were there when Florida was brought in, say that this land was down at the base of the back of their lots. That would be more than the 3 feet that's talked about. This is just a plan to show that if some of these homes were flipped, their street access would be here. Ryler Park would come all the way down, access to Florida. Instead of connecting a Colorado, you would have the same kind of a dead-end street here that you have under their current proposal, but you could access directly to Florida. You have a 300-foot line of sight between there and where Colorado comes out. The actual distance, when you take a look at this with the greenbelt area that's proposed, pushes that road to under about 125 feet, coming up to the Florida intersection, which is also directly across from a development over here, which, while it shows 2 accesses, is actually blocked off. So again, this is what it would look like. What we propose is that for fire, until the second access is brought in, that this could be made an emergency gated access. And not a new concept. I'll show that in just a few minutes. This is just to give you a line of sight. This is where we're proposing could possibly come out onto Florida. And if you look here, it's got a very good line of sight going in both directions. Here is Colorado. When you take a look, this is to help site it. The proposed Florida access is here versus Colorado here. So going this direction, there's a much better view of Florida than you have coming out of Colorado. I drew this to just show the existing connectivity through the city as I understood it. In yellow are the major arteries. This is Colorado in red, showing connectivity through to the school. This map is interesting because they took a 1 mile radius of the area from the proposed development from Ryler Park. And all of these letters represent subdivisions that have single road access. They don't have 2 road access in and out. C, which I understand is in the unincorporated area, it's part of the county. As far as this development, it has a blocked access going onto Colorado, but it has a gate to allow for fire. The area A, when Florida was redone, they created, instead of having connectivity on Spruce Street, they built a bus stop, and there's actually no way to get a vehicle from Florida into that neighborhood should there be a blockage at the other entrance. All of these neighborhoods have the exact same thing. They're all single point of access. I tried to show over here the density to relate it to the density of the Cummings development, to say a single point access for them at this time with proposed 37 units is well within what has been there. When you go up towards track B, that's again coming in off of 32nd Street. 32nd, as you go down towards E, also has a center lane to allow for stack up for left-hand turns per the AASHTO's guideline. The existing development that was here at this point in time, they then went ahead, it has single point access out onto 32nd. I know there are some plans eventually to get connectivity through to to Florida, but that isn't in place at this point in time. They then added a high density housing complex here. Again, single point access. The street and back was never tied in to 32nd Street. So as I went through the ASHTOS guidelines and most codes, they allow for interpretation, and that's what we're asking for. So here again this is Colorado Boulevard. This is where Ryler comes out. This is this development right in here. Their access comes in off of Florida. It dead ends, but the road does go up. It has a gated area. This is what it looks like. What it allows for, it's a narrower street like Ryler because it was built back in 1993. And what these single access developments have allowed is people to utilize the street safely for their kids, for walking. The only people that would be entering it are those people that live in the area or are visiting. So you don't have what you have with the connectivity of other people trying to drive through. Put together in the packet, the longer version of this, but we have concerns again about the road access from the Cummings coming through Ryler, coming off of Colorado Boulevard, when Florida was designed specifically for this type of a turn lane, with the center lane being used for stack up. The city went to great expense to upgrade it for that. Also, Ryler, again, that track E backs up. As we go along, this is what's actually on the adopted plat map of 1993. At the beginning of the year, amendment number 1, and then in 94 again. And the last part of it says, by signing this plat, the city of Durango does not accept the offer of dedication for road right of way. Now, I know the cities have the ability to take land away later on, but this is, to me, a very unusual statement to have to clarify the water, the sewer that goes through track E as an easement to get to that, because when you look at those maps, everything does flow through there. So this is the first recorded plat. This is where it's listed. This is the statement blown up. These are the signatures of the people in the city. This is the second recorded plat in 93. What's also interesting, on the original one, it did not show plat E to go through. It showed it to actually have a turnaround. Miller Drive was created at this point, so they took away the turnaround, but this area again is now used for stack up traffic. The roads, what you have is also, I'm sorry, I'll get to that in just a second. This is the third recorded plat in 94. That same statement still exists. The initial traffic study, some of the questions that we had coming off of that, it said appeared to be 1.5 feet of fill. Now, when you look at the land, I'll show you some pictures, it's a lot more fill than that. They talk about the grades being 8% and 12%. As was mentioned, there's one recorded accident with the ice on the hill, but the residents will tell you that Colorado Boulevard has a lot of problems with the ice. Also, the traffic during right now when school is open, in the morning and the evenings, the traffic from Colorado Boulevard, from Florida Road along Colorado Boulevard backs all the way up to Ryler where it intersects. So to add more cars stacking up there, trying to come up Miller Drive, whether it's one car, 8 cars, or whether the households actually have teenagers and additional cars, it's going to create more issues.
Mark, I just want to do a time check with Mitchell. If we do we have remaining time? 3 minutes left.
Okay. So anyway, I just went to the ASHTOS guidelines, which just points out that there's lots of leeway, and it does ask for community input and does allow the commission to say it's a guideline. It's not exactly what needs to be done. I highlighted that, included it as part of the packet. This is 32nd Street showing, again, with a center turn lane. This is, when you look at it, it's 150 feet from the property line to Florida Road. If you have a green belt here and you slide this up, that traffic study, I would question what's your remaining distance from here to here for cars. You have an overflow right now of cars from the day school that park right here. This area overflows and they park. You also have this, the lines of sight. You can see the depression here and the raised land here. That's more than 3 feet. The back of the houses, if the houses were built here, they'd be looking up and into and over the fences. This is the power line easement they talk about. Here you can see this is landfill. The residents were there, told me this was the level of the land before they did the landfill. This shows, again, a blind curve coming out of Miller. Clear line of sight. This shows a car hidden behind the tree coming down Colorado, right where Miller comes in. Florida's right here. There the car pops out. This is what Ryler Drive looks like, because right now people do need to park. There isn't enough parking. Garbage cans come out. The mail service, we did get their permission to shoot this from the mail carrier, really significantly reduces the street. We just want to end up with that we would ask the city to really consider the fact that there's over 13 neighborhoods with single point of access. You go up to the college, there's 2 major roads there with single point of access at this point in time. Please don't change the nature of the neighborhood. People use it. They moved in there because it had in and out, but not through connectivity. Colorado was designed for that. Florida was designed for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sapper. I appreciate council allowing us to move through that as well. Is there any other folks in the wings for public comment on this issue?
Mayor Brookie, I'm not sure if you have anyone else waiting in the wings, but I do have a number of comments that need to be read into the record, but I think we should finish who might be in the audience who may want to participate first.
Thank you, Kevin. So Mitchell?
Yeah, we do have a couple others. I am going to allow John to speak. John, please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
And name and address for the record, please.
Hi, this is John Perry, 22 Miller Drive. I gave up my 3 minutes to Mark.
Okay,
thank you
so much. Duly noted. Any others?
Yes, we do have another one. Hold on a second. I'm going to allow Christine to speak. Christine, if you can unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
This is Christine and Nathan Trout of 34 Miller Drive, and we also yielded our minutes to Mark, and just want to say that we are in support of the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Duly noted. So is that any others?
We do have a couple others. Sierra, I'm going to allow you to speak. Please introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Sierra. I live 26 Miller Drive. I wanted to say that I am in support of Mark's presentation, and that I request an emergency access gate to be located at Ryler Drive, and I appreciate you taking that into consideration and the safety of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra. Other comments?
We do have another that has raised their hand. I'm going to allow Marcy to speak. Marcy, if you can unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is Marcy Spalding, 102 Folsom Place. And I just want to comment on the sewer. It does run through my property. And based on the study that was presented by PST Engineering, they did mention that my portion of sewer line under my lot should probably be for further discussion. And I just want to say that I do support that we look into that a little bit more. It appears to me by looking at the various sewer lines that there is some potential undeveloped property that would tie in to the sewer coming through the Ryler neighborhood as well as the Cummins property that probably is not accounted for at this time. And if any of those properties were to get further developed, I'm just wondering if my 8-inch sewer line will actually be able to accommodate it, or if I would have to get all the stuff torn up in my yard to take care of whatever issues might arise from that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. And Mitchell?
We do have another one, just a second. I'm going to allow John to speak. If you can unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm really Carol Good, John's partner. And I wanted to say that I support Mark's proposal and his take on everything that's going on. We are very concerned about the safety of the children in the neighborhood and the quality of our life here. And thank you for your time and considering trying to preserve a neighborhood that has been here in Durango since 1993. I've looked on that open space since I've owned this home for 17 years, and it's tough to give up, but it's a whole nother level to risk our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mitchell, any more?
I'm not seeing any more. If anybody is here to speak to this agenda item, please use the raise hand function.
And in the meantime, if Kevin can be reading other testimony into the record.
We do have one more. Hold on a second.
Okay. And we'll tee you Kevin up next.
J and D, I'm allowing you to speak. Please unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Julie Stone, my husband Doug Stone, and we're residents here on Colorado Avenue. We did yield our 3 minutes to Mark and wanted to let you know that we completely support the PowerPoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And with that, perhaps it's time for Kevin to read the other testimony into the record.
I would ask for a little clarification, either from Amy or from Dirk. And Mr. Sapphire came up. A number of individuals yielded their time. I believe I heard the Perrys, the Trouts, the Stones. Did I also hear Dickman yielded their time? And why I ask is because I do have a letter from Dickman, and it certainly would be entered into the record, but I don't believe we'd be reading it under the public participation under typical situation given the yielding of time.
Correct.
I do not have Marty or Howie Dickman that has spoken at this time.
I'll tell you what, let's just read them into the record, and you're gonna have to bear with me, but I would certainly ask Mitchell to appropriately time, because these may get lengthy.
I do see Marty and Howie have raised their hand in the attendee list. Do you want me to allow them to speak?
If they want to present their information personally, that's fine by me. I have a letter from them that was requested that it made sure it entered the record.
I would entertain their public testimony in favor of the written testimony, and the written testimony, of course, would be entered into the record for consideration as well. So if they are online, let's listen to them personally.
I have allowed Marty and Howie to speak. Please introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
It's Marty Dickman at 27 Miller, Durango, Colorado. And I only unmuted myself because it was Howie that was yielding his 3 minutes. I'm the one that wrote the public comments. Does that make sense?
That does. Would you like to summarize it for us?
I do not have them in front of me, so no, sorry.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it.
Very
Okay.
good. Thank you so much.
Well, why don't we start with Marty's comments? And again, bear with me. Dear City Council members, the new Cummins development off of Florida should have ingress and egress directly from Florida. It is not a good solution to have everyone in the new development driving through the Ryler neighborhood. Ryler Park is not set up to accommodate such an increase in traffic. The streets are barely two-way now with kids on bicycles, pets, people with strollers in the streets, and RVs lining the street. There needs to be a dead end at the end of Ryler Drive with only emergency vehicle access. I imagine the residents of the neighborhood will be frustrated about having to get in line on Colorado or drive down Ryler Drive to exit the property. If they have to drive through Ryler Park to get to it through a street, they will probably not be happy about it and may take out their frustrations by speeding through our little neighborhood and compromising the safety of our streets. Regarding Section 7 of the traffic study, both surveys were conducted for 1.5 hours on a Friday and a Monday during June and July, at a time when there was no school buses, and a significant number of people were working from home during the pandemic. While I applaud the second survey, their conclusion about the amount of traffic is flawed. The first traffic study states only 7 additional cars would result in the morning due to the new development, and the second study states an additional 12 cars in the morning from the new development. If there is the impact of the new development, why not give them direct access to Florida? There are 37 homes proposed, each presumably having at least 1 car, and probably at least half will have 2 cars. Neither study takes into consideration that school is still not in session, which will result in more traffic due to people taking their kids to school in addition to the school buses. This is not an inconvenience, but a traffic hazard. Tract E verbiage on the original Ryler Park states, by signing below, the city declines the offer of public right-of-way. It does not say at this time or until such time we change our minds. City officials signed it back in '93. It has all the appearances of a signed contract. Virtually every other development in Florida has an ingress and egress onto Florida. Why is this one being treated differently? Even the developer's original plan included Florida access, according to the developer's architect. The new development should allow the residents of the new development access to Florida and not through Ryler Drive. I hope the City Council will take into consideration the impact the traffic will have on Ryler Park, our home values, the safety of our families, the integrity of our neighborhood, and our quality of life. Thank you for your consideration of our neighborhood concerns, Marty Dickman.
And that was just under 3 minutes, so good job, Marty. Thank you for your input. One of them yielded their time. I'm not sure which one. So I think one, if we can enter the other one into the public record, that would be helpful. So that we acknowledge that they, am I correct in that
He has those letters.
Yeah, that the one or the other yielded their time. So trying to be accountable for fairness here. Well, with that,
Dean, I do have 3 more.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. This is from George and Jan Curtis, 94 Folsom Place. Folsom Place residents appreciated the opportunity to address the city planning staff during the public comment period for the Florida Road Plan Development Proposal. We have read the Planning Commission staff report and wish to thank the staff for including several of our concerns in the report, specifically stormwater drainage issues, sewer capacity, height restrictions, and the soil fill that has raised the original elevation of the property. We also appreciate the planning department staff included the recommendations that the height of the units along Folsom Place border be restricted to 29 feet rather than 34 feet, and that the setback along Folsom be adjusted to 30 feet instead of the proposed 20 feet. Planning staff also included recommendations for a soil study to determine the original elevation of the property and sewer study to identify and fix potential sewer capacity problems. We urge the City Council to include the above recommendations as the project goes forward. Folsom Place residents also expressed to the Planning Commission concerns with the actual density of the project as it relates to lot size along the Folsom Place neighborhood. The current proposed lot size is much smaller than the lot size in Folsom. and allows for 5 homes back into Folsom. Folsom residents are concerned that this, combined with the allowed height and elevation of the property, will block most sunlight from reaching our backyards and will block sight lines, creating a wall of buildings. The planning report also mentioned our concern about dust and noise created during construction, and we would like to reiterate that and emphasize that we would like to see parking for construction trucks and contractors' vehicles along the east side of the lot along Florida Road to minimize diesel fumes close to our homes. Although the report mentioned that LPEA did not see any problems with the primary plan as presented, utility poles are currently in Folsom Yard and have historically been accessed via Cummins property when needed. This seems to be an important issue that could be resolved before the project advances. It would seem prudent to include access via a new development rather than completely blocking access to the utility poles that are currently in existence in a well-established neighborhood with mature trees, sheds, and fences. In closing, we'd like to mention that we realize Durango is in need of more housing, and in general, this project seems to be a good fit if concerns mentioned above can be addressed. Thank you for considering these requests.
Excellent. Good timing as well. Good comments.
Okay. Couple more.
Excellent.
Bear with me. This one is from Sarah Compton and Edward Packard, 131 Ryler Drive. Council members, you have access to the PowerPoint presentation created by Mark Safar and Do Younce. Please look at it carefully. It contains information you need to know to help evaluate the proposed development of the Cummins property. As residents of Ryler Drive, we join our neighbors in urging that access to the proposed development be from Florida Road. Routing traffic through Ryler Park is an unreasonable, unnecessary burden on our neighborhood as well as the proposed development. Everyone will end up on Florida Road no matter what. That's a given. There is no sound reason for deviating from the custom of creating cul-de-sac developments off Florida. Thank you for your consideration. Okay, the final one. Ed and Marcy Waddell, 102 Folsom Place. Dear City Council and Durango Community Development Department, the proposed community development of 36 residences is still too dense. The portion that abuts Folsom Place is not consistent with the residential Folsom neighborhood and is likely to cause issues with the sewer lines that run on my property. The west side of the Cummins property should match what currently exists on the shared property line with the Folsom Place residences. The 4 Folsom Place lots, lot 20 through 23, are 7,200 square feet or larger. The Folsom houses are single story. I have a 25-foot setback and believe the others lots do as well. 3 of the Folsom properties have 55 to 60 feet between the property line and the house. The proposed 5 houses on the west side of Cummins property shows lots sizes of 32 to 4,000 square feet, 3,200 to 4,000 square feet, half the size of their Folsom neighbors. In addition, the plans suggest that the houses would be a mere 25 feet from the shared property lines. The plans neglect to state whether the single-family homes are 1, 2, or 3.5 stories, though from the public meeting in June, Reynolds Ash implied that they will be at least 2 stories. Cummins property, as well as the other properties to the south, are at a higher elevation than the Folsom neighborhood. With the higher elevation, a small lot size in such close proximity to the west property line, the new houses will tower over the existing Folsom properties, leaving us without any privacy. Furthermore, this area is more dense than the RM medium density standard sites in the narrative offered by the developer, which states 8 units per acre. The 5 proposed houses sit on a total of 20,000 square feet, only a half an acre. The homes that share the property line with the Folsom residents should be consistent with what's already established, and therefore I would like the City Council to consider no more than 3 single-story houses, each with at least 40 feet of yard from the property line to the house. After looking over the preliminary sanitary sewer capacity analysis, I continue to be concerned about the 8-inch sewer line that runs through my property and feeds into the 10-inch line at Folsom Place cul-de-sac. My first concern is that I counted 108 single and multifamily units in Zone A, whereas PSD Engineering listed 103. Did PSD Engineering include the 4 houses on Jameson that are currently county residences, or were the 5 empty lots on Jameson not included? How about the 2 houses on Florida, 800 and 830 Florida Road? Is there any consideration that the following addresses on Florida would need to tie into the existing sewer line. My main concerns are the notations PSD Engineering has listed in the study. As stated, based on Table 4, for the purpose of this study, we will identify any section of pipe where 1.4 FPS minimum is not achieved while the pipe is conveying either the average daily flow or the peak hour flow for further discussion. On Table 5A, as the sewer line on my property are below the 1.14
Kevin, our time is up, so I'm gonna.
The statement is largely complete, other than a thank you for considering that. So we'll make sure Amy gets those in your hands, and we will also include them in the public record. And that was the end of the 4 that I had to read into the record.
Very important, and thanks all for your comments. With that, I will close the public hearing and entertain any comments from council. I would like to say a couple things right off the bat. One is annexation is a big thing for the city of Durango in initial zoning. It's that step is that step which defines that property forever. It basically, well, in response to the last letter that we heard, a number of issues regarding the height of the structure and all those kinds of things are not really considerations that we take into account at this point. Annexation and initial zoning deals with land use, as has been suggested, as residential density, which has been established as a maximum of 37 units, and access, which is the difficulty that I personally am having with this issue. And it brings to mind annexation is also the time when we consolidate properties, not necessarily ownerships of properties, but consolidate properties for the purpose of effective planning. And that's what I believe is happening here, quite honestly, is we know that there's one small parcel left, and it's not the city's normal prerogative or intent to annex properties that are not advanced by the property owner. But in a number of cases, we have not annexed because the entire picture couldn't be solved effectively. So as I look at that, I really wish that we were annexing personally the remaining portion of that, what's been a dark hole along Florida Road for the past 40 years that I've been in this community. And because of its unique nature and its unsolvable problems. And I'd like to think that we could solve the problems for that entire property and annex it as in its entirety, so that we don't have a remaining county enclave within our community. And I just advanced that. I think that I also have a question with the legitimacy of the right-of-way based on the plat language. I think that's pretty compelling. And I'd like to know, I have a question for staff as to whether that we've actually done a legal evaluation of the plat language such that we feel confident that we're not infringing upon the statements that were demonstrated this evening that are shown on those plats. Secondly, I have issues with the sewer. If I understand that right, and this is another question for staff, we have a dysfunctional sewer. 8-inch line is is effective for a large amount of units. 8 inches is not as big as you get, but it's certainly as big as most lines are in Durango. However, if it's flat and it's dysfunctional at this time, I would think that as part of this development, that improvement would need to be made or corrected before we add to the issues that the city has to address in the future. Next, I have the stacking distance as proposed by the existing second access, which would be the primary access closest to Florida Road onto Colorado Ave at 150 feet, less the actual distance of the intersection seems inappropriate based on, and I'd like to have that correlation made by staff for the traffic count of the latest traffic study that was done, given the fact that clearly the testimony tonight was that it's already stacking clear down to Ryler from Florida Road, and that the stacking distance from that proposed outlet onto Colorado would be I'd like to know that that's by AASHTO standards correct. And then, then my last point was my first point, which is why wouldn't we want to attempt to annex all of that county enclave to provide the optimal circulation for all properties so that we can maximize safely the maximum amount of units in that entire area in the future, rather than accept this plan and then have a later solution, whether that's 5 years or 25 years. In fact, if we had the appropriate access point, we might encourage that property to develop sooner than later, and therefore we have the benefit of units that would have a safe access directly onto Florida, as was stated, instead of considering the fact that they're going to be a lone soldier to develop their own access, and it's still going to end up on Florida, which seems to be counter to what planning staff has recommended. So there's 3 questions in there. I can repeat them in the future. So is there anything from other counselors that staff can answer as we move forward here?
Dean, I agree with you. I'm also concerned about the original plat language and the drawings that were on the plat about how the road ended. So I would also agree. I would like to hear more about that. And I also was wondering about you were talking about, and it was shown that southern more access across land that's not currently in the city, and 2 other parcels that are in the city but don't have that capability right now. In the state of Colorado, annexation is a pretty challenging concept, and so I'd like to hear more about what would have to happen in order to truly annex that centerpiece that seems to be in the middle of everything beside the current Cummings property.
Excellent question. Yeah.
I'll add a couple too. My questions are similar to yours, Mayor, and to Mayor Pro Tem. I would like a little bit more illumination on if, the engineering study wasn't definitive on the sewer issue. They said it may improve based on the flow of having additional homes. And my question really is, should that not be the case, how do you rectify that? And I sort of concur with the mayor that that may be an improvement that's necessary up front. My next question is same relative question to the plat note. I want to know if that is a reference to the fact that the city at the time was not agreeing to develop that as a road, or if it truly is a commitment not to develop. I think that does need some specific evaluation. My other question is, can this access issue be changed in the next stages, or are we locking ourselves in? I'm assuming we are, but for clarity, I'd really like to know that. And relative to that, is there a future traffic study, or are we just going with the engineering study that the applicant tried to do that may provide further illumination and answers to questions from some of the neighbors and answers to the stacking issue back up on some of these roads as they approach Florida? I can say as a kid, it wasn't too long ago being at the elementary school in that neighborhood. It is interesting to go through that neighborhood and try and turn out onto Florida today, because you've limited access points through there, and it does stack up pretty heavily during those times of day. And then that's it. So if you could help us with those.
And Barbara?
Yes, in addition to those questions, thank you, other counselors. Mark, I'm just curious if Mr. Saffer's presentation was given to the Planning Commission in advance of their decision, and is there a process for them to hear this? And if it wasn't presented, to hear this and some of their concerns and the issues that they raised.
The PowerPoint presentation was not given to the Planning Commission. We received it late last week.
Yeah,
but we can copy of it.
It was just sent out this last week for this meeting specifically, and the Planning Commission did not have benefit of that.
Right, so they might have made their vote and their recommendation. They did that in advance of all this information from this PowerPoint, is my point. Thank you.
Mark, before you start in on addressing some of these other questions, I did want to speak to plat notes in general. And certainly, I believe we need to go back and look at meeting minutes from 1993 to fully understand the intent. But the idea of an offer to dedicate is very, very typical of any development in which there would be a road that we may need in the future, but we don't need right now. The reason you do an offer to dedicate is to avoid requiring the city to maintain something in the long haul before it's really necessary for community benefit. So we will always take an offer to dedicate and very often not accept that dedication at the time of the offer. But the offer stands. This plat note, as you read it, is not entirely clear the way it's prepared. I will tell you that if you brought 10 surveyors in the room to write plat notes, each one of them have a little different way of writing the plat notes. This language may very well have been very clear to those who were party to this activity in 1993. It's not clear to us today. It could be construed in a number of ways. I think going back into the meeting minutes, which there should be perfectly accurate meeting minutes, would help describe or define what the intent was here. So I'm not discounting what we're hearing from the neighbors, but I want you to understand that an offer to dedication and a non-acceptance of an offer does not predicate that we didn't want it. It's just about a timing issue. So with that, I'll let Mark walk through some of the other issues that I think are good concerns that you've raised.
I would, before Mark does, this is Dirk, I would concur with what Kevin said in terms we do use offers to dedicate all the time. I think it does require some further follow-up. It's also, I would, to the extent that it's necessary, place the burden on the developer to assist in that process, because I think they're required to prove up, public access. So it may require some additional work above and beyond the minutes. If we need to do that, we can do so.
I encourage that only because that is one of the three primary tenets of our action here this evening, which is annexation. And as I mentioned before, that establishes forever land use, density, and access. So we may hear something different about, in response to Chris's question, are we bound to that point of access by annexing this evening? And my sense would be yes, that by annexing this, we established access points from here on out. So we established that this evening. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why I think this is such a critical question from a legal standpoint. And if we aren't prepared to have ruling on that this evening, I think we need to think about it.
And Mayor, in that regard, if when we answer this question, if we could address, or these questions from council, if we could also address why the other communities addressed in the PowerPoint, the pocket neighborhoods, I think it was A through F, had only one access. I was just curious if we could talk about how that was done in the past and why.
And along with that, what the City of Durango's rule is for a dead end subdivision, and exactly how many units would be approvable in a dead end subdivision, even though the case has been made that 2 accesses are better than 1, and that's certainly true, but we do have a rule about that. So with that, Mark, I guess we're back to you. Sorry to load that all on you.
Okay. I think I got all your questions written down. So Mayor Brookie, your first question was about annexing the property to the south. I know that the applicants did approach the owners of that property who I believe I mentioned they were not interested in being a part of this project, and that's as far as trying to acquire that property went when they refused to participate. I would say that if in the future, if those owners or future owners ever wanted to develop that property, it would have to be through an annexation, and the city does have pretty significant power to shape how that development is done. So we would write a plat note very clearly as part of this development that we would anticipate having access south of the current property through that property and hopefully to all the properties to the south. So I think that's all I can tell you about that.
Right.
You had two more questions.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that your other two questions about the flat sewer line and stacking distance, a few of these could probably be answered best by Steve Pavlik, the engineer who did the traffic study and sewer study, and he's in the audience tonight. So anything about the details of those studies and how they were performed, I would defer those to Steve. And let's see, Kim had a question. I think it was essentially the same as your question about annexation. Is that correct?
Yes, and then also, and I don't remember who made the point, but I was wondering also about the sewer in Folsom and if that's problematic or if there's another connection also available. If that, I understand that the drop, you may not be able to solve that problem. So if there was another way to.
Okay. We'll ask that one to Steve. And then Councilor Team asked about annexation and the plat language. I also had some questions about the traffic study. So I guess we have already answered annexation. We're looking into the plat, and Steve Pavlik can do the traffic study. Councilor Noseworthy mentioned the Planning Commission, or whether Planning Commission was able to see that PowerPoint. They were not. They did get approximately 25 pages of public comments and probably more than a dozen commenters at their at the Planning Commission hearing. So most of that information was presented to them. Was there anything else?
Yeah,
Mark, the other question was just, are we locked into the decision relative to access during this annexation access? And will there be another traffic study as this goes forward?
Yeah, we would like to have a more refined traffic study as this goes forward, and the configuration of the access can change based on the outcome of this meeting. Obviously, any new configuration would have to be reevaluated because it affects not only the intersection where the traffic would occur, but also the layout of the lots internally.
So post annexation, you could imagine if the traffic study considers all of these elements that this access issue gets revisited. Is that accurate?
So you're talking about expanding the scope of the traffic study to include different potential outcomes like access to the south?
I'm just wanting to make certain I understand if a decision to annex this property occurs this evening, are we locking the city into the access that's been discussed, no matter what we decide tonight?
So the annexation itself is just to obtain the land. The conceptual development plan is where we're going to decide where that access occurs. So if we annexed, I don't know if we could separate, I don't think we could separate the three actions right now. However, if the city did choose to annex the property, the configuration of the lots, the configuration of the access could change. Yes.
Just to back up, I do really want to get your opinion on what annexation establishes, and that is density, or land use, density, and access. So if in my opinion, there's no purpose in annexing unless there's established appropriate circulation. That's one of the basic factors that gets established with annexation. Not just land use, not just density, but points of access, specific points of access. And that's what we're talking about here tonight. And so I think it's misleading if unless I'm absolutely wrong and the code has changed, that about the purpose of annexation, establish those three things for the developer at this point. And I believe that, you know, if we're not comfortable with the access, then that's the point of it, to evaluate those points of access. And that might be a mutual benefit for other properties, is why I'm bringing it up at this point. And if it's just not convenient for that developer to go and the other developer doesn't want to be part of the project, that's not the point. The point is, when is that other property going to figure out where their access point is? And the reality is, you've already figured out for him, it's going to be on Florida Road. That's the only other option he has, unless they, you know, get through Folsom somehow. So that's what we're also establishing tonight, if we accept this point of access issue, is how the other property is also accessed, because we just stranded them at this point.
Well,
So those are the considerations I'm taking into account. And I think it's really true that we give them established rights about access by virtue of annexation in that process. If I'm not,
they would not be able to access Folsom because there's a solid line of houses. So the only access that they could have right now is onto Florida, and then it's the Cummins property developed. They could have access onto Florida as well as access through wherever the Cummins project ends up developing. But I would say that the annexation is possible without the precise access point being known, because the development plan is still being finalized, and the annexation is not finalized until there's a final development plan that's ready to be finished. That's my understanding of it. But if the council is not comfortable with all three aspects of the proposal, which is the zoning, annexation, and development plan, then you can't pull one of those threads out and just act. They have to be acted on together.
mm-hmm. But
I wouldn't mind hearing from Dirk and Kevin if that, I mean, you know, I am comfortable with the other two pillars of that decision. I think there's a lot of question. You've got some questions on plat notes relative that we need some follow-up on that access issue. But, you know, based on what I'm hearing, you know, the annexation piece and the zoning piece, I am comfortable with, and would love to move this project forward without it being hindered by the access piece. But if that's not possible, then so be it.
And certainly Dirk can weigh in here. You know, my thought is there's no need to annex unless we have a development plan that is of interest to the council to approve. So, you know, moving the annexation forward isn't necessarily critical until you know that you have these other issues resolved. And I never am a fan of suggesting continuance, but that is an option for you, for us to go back and bring more clarity through the other process. Because I think for the developer, I don't think there's any uncertainty about the annexation. What's their uncertainty is about the development proposal. And once the development proposal is clear as to what the council and the planning commission are supportive of, the annexation will occur. And it's just a matter of then directing an annexation ordinance, doing 2 readings of the ordinance, and then the final publication that takes some time to do that. But the annexation is a function of, we have a development here that wants to come in. We want to bring it into the city. It's the sticking point is the development itself, and how, as I think, if I'm, you know, reading the tea leaves here, there's great concern about the access at this point in time. You know, we have gone through a number of subdivisions over the last, let's say, 8-10 years, where what we're finding is our street system is not connecting up because of opposition and concerns about safety. And we end up with cul-de-sacs. And the cul-de-sacs really don't meet the intent of any of our development standards or our plans for connectivity. They also are less efficient from service provision for everybody who provides them. I do understand, and I do have empathy and appreciate the concerns of the neighbors about having more cars in their neighborhood. I get that. But really, if you look at the plans we have in place and the standards we have in place, the intent is to connect these street systems up. I mean, even if you zoomed out and Mark had a map on his presentation that showed the Ryler Park Miller Drive area, and I mean, you look at it and it looks like it's intended to go south through the entirety of probably all of those properties that Dean is speaking about needing to come in collectively. We don't have that option right now. So now we have one property owner interested in developing, and we're trying to incrementally do what I think big picture would do, which is you bring it all in at once, you run the road south and you connect it down to Florida at the bottom. But what we're hearing from the residents is they're not interested in that. But back to the point on annexation, if you have a development proposal before you that you're supportive of, I think the annexation is a foregone conclusion. You wouldn't turn down an annexation, but support the development proposal. You know, you could continue this thing, or you could, as Mark suggested, you could let it go through the preliminary stage, and that's when the details on the access really come to fruition. But really, the access points are somewhat conceptual right now, and there's only a couple of options. So, I mean, I'm kind of hearing that there's concern about the one that is currently being proposed. Whether you want it to go back to the drawing board or learn more about what the intent of the original plat was back in '93, it's really your decision to do that. But I think Mark is right about the annexation being a kind of a conditioned process. So unless you have an approved development proposal through the stages here, you don't really have a final annexation.
Kevin, Steve has his hand raised. I don't know if maybe he has some more information, Steve Pavlik.
He doesn't. I see Barbara had perhaps one more question for him before.
I did. I just wondered if the developer has considered the proposed other options for access. Has that been presented to the developer? And if not, what consideration would they give in the next stage?
And I just want to follow up, Kevin. You know, I do have concerns about both points of access. One, the Ryler connection from a standpoint of legality and plat note, and what that could mean, what repercussions that could have for the city if there was a challenge of that plat note. And secondly, stacking distance that Steve will probably help us out with here on the direct access to Colorado Drive, the new access on Colorado. So with that, perhaps Steve Pavlik, are you there, Steve?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. I can't see you. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Steve Pavlik with PST Engineering, 150 Rock Point Drive. So I prepared the traffic study and the sewer study. Let me start with the sewer. That one's a little more straightforward, I think. I don't live on Folsom, so I can't attest personally to whether or not there's been significant sewer issues there. I have talked to the utilities department, and they have indicated that they don't see that as a problem area. So again, I'm just relaying the information. They're the ones who maintain it. They're the ones who have to clean it when there's an issue. They don't recognize that as a problem area. They don't get lots of calls. In fact, they told me that most of the calls in that area come from the service connection from Chapman Hill. They get a lot of odd things flushed down the toilet in Chapman Hill, apparently. From a capacity standpoint, the lines in Folsom are nowhere near capacity. I think even with the development, we're at 35%. So I know one of the gentlemen in the neighborhood had mentioned maybe I missed 3 or 4 houses, and that's a possibility. But I don't think that a handful of houses would really make a difference from a capacity standpoint. There is lots of documentation and standards that point to low velocities can cause sewer issues because the solids settle out in the lines. A lot of the velocities in the lines in Folsom were right around the area where you could potentially get some issues. But again, I did talk with the utilities department, and they said they realize that line's flat, so they clean it a little more frequently than normal, but it isn't a high issue area in their opinion. And actually, so velocity is linked to the amount of flow that you have in a pipe. So if you actually add, these pipes are somewhat oversized. So a lot of the codes are written that the larger the diameter, the flatter slope you're allowed. So in the past, there's been times when engineers have designed, they've met the code standard by making the pipe size bigger, even though it didn't necessarily need to be, because they needed the extra slope to get positive flow. And I believe that's probably what happened in the case of Folsom. But from a technical numbers standpoint, if you add more flow to the line, it should actually help to scour. They call it scouring, scour out the solids. So if anything, it should help. Again, it's, 37 houses out of 100, and I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but so I can't say they'll never have an issue again, but from a technical calculation standpoint, it should actually help. And again, city's utility department has indicated it's not a high problem area. Does anybody have any follow-ups on the sewer before we move on to traffic?
No, I think that was sufficiently covered, that one, Steve. If you can maybe talk about stacking distance, that would be helpful.
Sure. So there was a fair amount of comments about additional traffic studies. And I guess from my standpoint, I don't feel like there was a whole lot new presented in the PowerPoint that I haven't already looked at. Maybe there were a few things that weren't specifically written directly in the study. I think I could do calculations and I could show you that a connection to Florida will work. I could do calculations and show you that a connection to Florida without the connection to Ryler will work. I could show you there's low enough traffic. 37 houses sounds like a lot, but when it comes to peak hour volumes, which is when you do your analysis, we're talking 15, 20 cars in the AM and PM. So those connections would work, at least in the current condition. So I'm not saying if you guys, want specific things addressed and we could look at further, I don't have an issue with that. But I could tell you that without doing the analysis, I could tell you that most likely if we analyzed a single connection to Florida Road, it would function from a level of service standpoint. If Colorado is functioning with 3 times the traffic, a connection with 1/3 of the traffic would function. The issue is, from the city standpoint, long-term planning. So if you think about, for instance, Camino del Rio and how, it wasn't that busy of a street 40 years ago, and there's just access points all over the place, gas stations and Town Plaza. And as traffic on the main line got busier and busier, all those connections become issues because people have trouble pulling out. There's multiple access points. People are trying to figure out if the person next to them on the access that's 50 feet away is making a left or a right, and if they're going to pull out or if I should pull out. So I'm not saying Florida is there yet, but in the long term, if you add another access, and let's say Florida Road continues to grow, which it certainly seems like that portion of the county is kind of set up for a fair amount of growth. All of a sudden you have a substandard level of service at Colorado, and you also have one at this new access. And now you put, let's say somebody, maybe it's a developer, maybe it's a city, maybe it's a combination, puts a traffic signal in at Colorado. Well, now the new development that we just approved doesn't get the benefit of that traffic signal, and their access is still not up to par. So in the short term, as I said, I could show you in a traffic study that because the traffic's low enough from this development that it would work in multiple configurations. But in the long term, and again, we're talking, 20, 25 years, whatever the case might be, you might have two spots that are an issue instead of one. As far as the stacking, I did look at, I think there's a bit of an evaluation and traffic study about sight distances and turning speeds. So Colorado Avenue does have a dedicated left turn lane on Florida, similar to what a new access into the property would have. There's a 2-way left turn on the southbound approach. So although not many people are making a left, if someone wanted to, they could use that left turn lane to help make the left. So Colorado has similar benefits to what the new access would have. The stacking, I do agree, the model doesn't show it, but it doesn't always reflect exactly what's going on. And I also didn't have the benefit of school being in session and there's a pandemic. The numbers are adjusted. I think I adjusted for COVID-19 by 16%. And that was based on CDOT count data out on Camino. That was a difference between June last year and June this year. Traffic was 16% higher last year. And I also added, I estimated the trips from the school and showed a range of trips from the school from 20 to 40% in the study. The longest queue it showed was 3 cars. Again, I didn't have the opportunity to be out there and witness when school was in session. I was hopeful with school starting in 2 weeks, I can get out there and verify if the model was kind of accurate. But with the 3 options the school is proposing, it's doubtful that traffic's going to get to the levels that it was before the pandemic. I believe that the access on Colorado would work, and I believe it would be safe. There's limited. I believe Mark brought up the statistics. 5 reported accidents on this section, on the Colorado-Florida intersection. 3 of them were distracted drivers. 1 of them hit a patch of ice. There's already the office complex on the other side of the street with an access at that same location. And there's been 1 accident in 10 years, and it was ice related. And I think the occasionally during school, traffic might back up across that new access, but in the long range, I think a connection to Colorado would be a smarter choice than a connection to Florida. And that's about, unless you have more specific questions, that's about what I have.
Steve, when in the development plan, was there, so you say, you're creating a defense against coming out on Toledo. We're hearing that loud and clear. So what's the proposed circulation for that stranded piece of property to the south of the proposed development? Would that also be linked through this current development and then dump out onto Ryler Drive as well? Is that what you're proposing as the solution to that remaining enclave?
Well, it could. Again, the connection to Ryler Drive is really I don't think it would make or break the access, at least not in the short term. In the long term, connectivity gives people options. So if the Colorado intersection, backed up and somebody decided they want to go, or somebody wanted to drop their child off at the school and Colorado was backed up and people crossed across the entrance, they could potentially go up Ryler and go to the school and drop their child off. But I don't think, in a 20-year window, I don't think a connection to Ryler would make or break the access. But I do agree with, the engineering department that, connecting that through and connecting up to Florida to the south, that could potentially be a ride in, ride out. It's just something we haven't looked at yet, but I think planning for a future connection makes sense.
Well, I just want to assure the neighborhood that they're not, now it's 37 units, and when the next 37 unit project comes in, are they going to get dumped on it again? And is that the plan, or is it not the plan? Because it sounds like it's the plan. So I don't know.
Well, I guess, if based on counts, I think it was 70 to 75% of traffic goes to town on Florida or comes back from town. So I don't know that additional units to the south would really contribute a whole lot of traffic to Ryler or Miller. If a connection was made, obviously.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's another point of access. Our consideration this evening in a future proposal be required to make a connection to the south when it becomes available? That would be a condition of annexation as well, something like that. At any rate, thanks for your help, Steve. Any other questions of Steve while we have him?
I would want to make certain that we answered Councilor Youssef's question about why the other developments did not have to have a secondary access, and then also the question of whether or not the developer has considered a Florida Road entrance.
Thanks, Barbara.
I could I could jump in on one of those. I believe previous development concept plans did show a connection to Florida. So I think the developer is generally open to that as far as I know. And Elizabeth maybe could chime in if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct, Steve. And I believe that through multiple iterations with staff, we arrived at the current proposal because it's in compliance with the projection for connectivity and the desire for connectivity in our current code. And maybe Mark might be able to speak a little bit more to how that's identified and that transition throughout this process.
Yeah, that's right. The city's preference is to have access onto Colorado and Florida because they are closer to meeting our adopted codes and standards, specifically the Ryler Park access. But, neither Colorado nor Florida are perfect locations for new access, but based on an evaluation from our engineering staff, the Colorado access checked more boxes than the Florida access did. Although the Florida would also work. It's just not the preferred access. And then to Councillor Youssef's last question about the one access neighborhoods, I don't have all that map right in front of me, but I was looking at it while Mr. Safra was presenting it. And it looks like some of those neighborhoods every one of those neighborhoods had some type of issue. It looked like some of them had topography as an issue. Trying to remember which one it was, and I can't, I'm sorry. But I know one ran into a steep slope. One was by the golf course off of Gigline Gulch Road. I think it ends because it's surrounded by the golf course on 2 or 3 sides. Jameson Drive, staff actually recommended that Jameson be a through street when the Jameson Court project was developed. City Council denied that request. I think the Sunier project next to Sunshine Gardens was on that list, and there's actually no access there yet. If that's the right thing that I was looking at, staff hopes that at some point there'll be a cul-de-sac through there and then a driveway into the large lots in the county, but there could potentially be a through street through Riverbend Drive. And I didn't write down what each one of the issues for each one of those streets was, but I think it'd be safe to say that not one of those streets had an at-grade connection ready to be aligned, like the one that exists between Cummins and Ryler Park.
Thank you.
That's all.
Mark, along with that, I think the question was also what's the code the land use code talk about for maximum units on a dead end or a cul-de-sac or dead end?
Yeah, I'm working from memory here, so I believe if it's 1,000 feet or longer, it's 10, basically 10 units. The code says 100 ADTs, average daily trips, which roughly translates to 10 single-family homes. And if it's 500 feet, up to 500 feet, then you can have more than between 500 and 1,000 feet, you can have 20 single-family homes. And with Jameson Court, for example, they're probably close to 20 units on there. And one of the reasons for having that requirement is safety. You want to have DFPD be able to get into the neighborhood if the main access is blocked, or have the neighbors have a way to escape also. So Jameson Court or Jameson Drive has that implicated emergency access that DFPD has. They have access and they can open that if they ever need to for some reason.
Okay. Thanks. Your memory is better than mine on that one. And it's not a finite number. It's right based on the length of the dead end. Any other questions of staff or Steve or Elizabeth? Barbara?
This is a question for Kevin. Kevin, you said you're reluctant to use continuance, but I wondered in this circumstance, what benefit you might see or what could be discussed if we did pursue a continuance of this decision tonight.
The reason for the reluctance is you have a virtual room full of people interested in coming to resolution on this issue, whether it's the developers or the neighbors. And a continuance is difficult for all parties involved, including the council, because you'll have to go through this again. In terms of additional information, there could be additional information that maybe compels council to have better personal clarity on how they might feel about this, whether it's this plat note issue or whether it's, I think Steve had some pretty compelling comments about the long-term nature of access and what it does for your community. And I think those are things that probably could provide some more clarity for you as well. But really it's the council's call in terms of whether you're compelled by that information or not. But certainly if we went back to the drawing board, we would go back and look at those plat minutes to find out specifically what the intent was. I'm fairly certain that our road system map and our plans in place are always to connect roads up with other roads because of the things that Steve just spoke about, as well as our provision of service, provision of utilities, that sort of thing. But you know, there's always unique circumstances, as Mr. Safik pointed out. So you know, we can always go back to the drawing board and take a couple more weeks or several more weeks and come back. That's your call if you want us to go and take another look at it.
Thank you, Kevin. But and I am also not opposed to the project or its location or its density. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't get clarity for those of us in this virtual room to have a decision made with clarity on the legal situation of Ryler Park, because that's pretty, that is the major opposition here, and it's my major question of not putting the city in any kind of challengeable decision. And I would like to have that researched. As Dirk says, it's kind of the onus of the developer to gain specifics on that legality, and I'd like to see that happen and brought back to us personally. If Steve can give us some additional information on the overview of how not only his project works, but how the other project would be served, so that we don't, by virtue of annexation and approval of these access points, create a stranded property for the future. I think it's ours to, annexation is when our only real point of control of those kinds of issues. So I'd like to get it resolved now and brought back to us.
I would add to that Steve alluded to the idea that his traffic study didn't include some of the stacking that's relative to the school year. And I think having the ability to understand that a little bit better, these two access issues are not far enough away from each other in terms, I know there's a preference for the one for all the planning reasons that do make sense, and that ultimately may be the outcome. But as we're sitting today, between the two, they don't seem that distinct to me. And so answering those three issues is important, I think, before we actually move the access issue forward. I agree with the other two pillars of this, and if there's a way to move forward on them without continuing the entire matter, then I'm for that. But it seems to me as though Kevin and Mark, you correct me if I'm wrong, you'd rather, if that's the way that we would pursue it, you would just continue the entire matter, get the answers to the questions, and then we would move from there.
Maybe I put Dirk on the spot a little bit here and wonder whether we can extricate this access issue from the larger discussion relative to annexation. It seems to me the concept plan hasn't even been approved yet. Preliminary plan takes you with the more details. Often the plans change because of that. But I don't know that I have a good answer for you, Chris, and I don't know if can you opine on this a little bit?
Well, and I think to Kevin's point earlier that the annexation is kind of the easiest part of this if you get through the plan. So I'm not sure that I see a lot. I mean, to be clear, we're not annexing it tonight. This is the first step toward annexation. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that if you don't have a plan. So I think I would concur with what Kevin said earlier. I think it's possible that you could do that by an appropriate motion, I suppose, by making it clear that the action on the other two parts don't in any way constitute, any sort of approval of particular access points. But I'm not sure that helps the developer much because we still have to go. I mean, it would still be on hold, if you would, until those issues are determined. So I'm not sure that, the comments tonight were probably less about annexation than they were about the development. So I think that, again, I'm not sure as a practical matter that approving parts of it would help a lot. Does that make sense?
It does. I think your comment about it doesn't help the developer to have an annexed piece of property without those provisions. I mean, that's back to my point, which is that's what walks away from an annexation is the access point. If we can't define that in this action, then I'm not prepared to vote in a positive manner. But perhaps we should just I'd entertain a motion for annexation or not, or a continuance as has been suggested at one point. Or any other options that council deems effective.
I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion to continue this issue until the three issues that we just articulated are resolved, so that council can reconsider the annexation.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call or any discussion prior to the roll call? Seeing none, we're pretty well discussed. Kim?
Could you repeat the motion, please?
Sure. Chris, can I ask you to restate that?
The motion is to continue the annexation until the three issues that we recently articulated are resolvable by the staff and they're ready to present the annexation to council. Those three issues in my mind are how does the traffic study account for school being in session? How do the plat notes reflect the intent in 1993? Now my brain is slipping for the last issue. Dean, what was your other issue?
Access.
Yeah, I think the other issue was, just other options for access that would relieve the existing Rather neighborhood from additional traffic. And conversely, does the development plan anticipate receiving the next adjacent development that would also be additive to the traffic going into the existing Rather neighborhood?
So amended.
May I ask a procedural question?
Sure.
I could be wrong. I thought the applicant had to agree to a continuance. If I'm wrong, then I'll shut up, but I just want to make sure we don't do anything out of the ordinary.
I don't think if council's not, I mean, the other option is denial. So I don't think there's historically an agreement concurrence by the applicant regarding a council action. Dirk? You're on mute, Dirk. Dirk,
I mean, I think there's some practice that that's the case. But I do think the council has the authority to continue it if they desire to do so. To gain more information. I mean, basically you're saying we don't have enough information at this point to make a decision. That's how I read. I think procedurally, when you talk about continuance, that usually means you continue the hearing. You've already closed the hearing. So we may need to revisit how we actually bring this back. But I read this as that you're not yet ready to make a decision on the merits because you want some more information. And I think that's within your purview to ask for more information.
good point. We have closed the hearing, so it would be a reopening of this discussion and bringing this back to be agendized on a future date when the applicant is ready. So in that case, do we want to call it a continuance or
I think that that's as accurate a term as any. You're effectively delaying the decision.
One suggestion is it might be called a postponement.
It's sort of the same. I think that may be sort of the same thing. So I think the intent, if we want to make it clear, the intent is that council is delaying a decision pending some additional information on the 3 issues that have been described.
Okay. Well, the motion stands, and I think we're ready for a roll call.
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bateen?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes. Thank you for some good thoughts, and I'm looking forward to seeing this back on our agenda soon. With that, we have completed our
Dean, might I make a suggestion?
Sure. Thank you.
You know, we have council reports and actions as number 13. I'm wondering if we could move to number 14, swap the two so that we could have the executive session earlier rather than later, given that it's 9:30.
That is a good point. And we also have the city update. And Barbara?
I think there's also one more item though, which is regarding city council going off furlough. I think that's still an agenda item.
That is in 12.1 city update. That is correct.
Oh, is that where it's located? Okay.
I believe so. It's sort of interestingly, oh no, it is reports and actions, which is 13.1.
Okay.
And we might, are we comfortable in moving ahead of the city update in favor of anticipated executive sessions this evening and perhaps not coming back to that this meeting? As council, do I have general concurrence with move on to 13.1 and then move into executive sessions? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So item 13.1, which is discussion and possible action regarding resolution 2020-14, temporarily reducing city council compensation in accordance with citywide reductions and furloughs during the time the COVID-19 emergency declaration is in effect. So if we could have a quick staff representation of the impact of that. And it as a,
Perhaps I could, this item was originally adopted by council as a resolution for the furlough, because as you recall, council salaries are actually set by ordinance. So there was some more formality taken rather than just a motion. That resolution stated, and the one that's in the packet is the original resolution that you adopted back in June, stated that the furlough would be in effect as long as the emergency order was in effect. The emergency order still is in effect, so this requires some additional action of council at this point to specifically alter the terms of that resolution so that you can effectively take yourself off furlough. So I would suggest you do that by motion, keeping in mind. So what you're effectively doing would be repealing that resolution whatever number it was.
Sure. If that's the course of business and recommended action, this has been discussed, and evidently it was linked to the emergency order, and all other city employees have been taken off furlough at this point. So I would entertain a motion to repeal this resolution.
I'll make a motion to repeal the resolution. I'd like to add that to make it retroactive to the same date that the employees went off furlough, which I believe was July 31st.
Mm-hmm. I believe that's correct, and I believe that was part of our previous discussions on this issue, if that's for the public to know. So
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes. And for the record, we're moving past item 12.1, the city update, and we are going to consider moving into executive session, item 14.1, which is a discussion and possible action concerning a motion to convene in executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters related to the interim city manager as permitted under CRS 24-64024FI, or actually that's FL. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please, to move into executive session?
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yeah. Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes. And for the public to know, what we are doing is moving into executive session. That'll mean that we close this Zoom for the moment. We haven't ended our meeting, our public meeting. We will be back, but it'll probably be very short to end our meeting. And if there's any decision, we will make no decisions in the executive session, and we'll see if there's any decisions made after we come out of the executive session. But those of you viewing will be out of touch for a few minutes, and we'll be back shortly. We also have consideration for another executive session should that become necessary.
Mayor Brookie, could I ask a point of clarification?
Yeah, we have it.
Asked on 12.1, are you expecting me to wait this out, or are you planning, did you cancel 12.1? I don't really have a report for you. There's a couple items we might touch on, but I guess I need clarification.
My intent was to cancel it, and I think in the observation of the time, the intent was to skip it tonight.
If I may.
But we'll see you.
You know where to find me. Thank you.
We certainly do. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate your time.
Mayor, we'll probably need 5 minutes to get to the other side at a break or something like that. I guess.
That sounds great. Grab fruit juice and Good evening. I'm Mayor Dean Brookie, and we are reconvening this meeting of City Council at 10:34 p.m. For the record, council met in executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters relating to the interim city manager as allowed in CRS 24-6-402-4FI. No decisions were made. If anyone who participated in the executive session believes the discussion went beyond the proper scope of the executive session, please state your objection now. Seeing none, the next agenda item is discussion and possible action concerning personnel matters related to the interim city manager.
I would like to make a motion, if that's okay, Mayor.
Absolutely. I'd entertain a motion.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we schedule an executive session as soon as possible to allow for the opportunity to discuss with interim city manager Amber Blake the topics covered tonight in executive session.
Thank you
I'll
for your
second.
motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Chris, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes.
And just to be clear, we will notice that as another executive session to discuss personnel for the purposes just elaborated in Mayor Pro Tem Baxter's motion.
Excellent. Thank you,
Right.
Dirk.
Thank you.
I would also entertain a motion for a follow-up executive session to discuss the items previously agendized for a possible second executive session for this evening. And that would be held immediately after, potentially be held immediately after the next scheduled executive session. Would there
So
be a
moved.
Well, I was going to say that motion could be made after the next executive session.
It
Yeah,
could
I
be
think the
posted,
question is, do you want to have the executive session now? So I understood, so just to be clear, I think it's confusing, so maybe we need to clear this up, what you meant.
I was, I can explain, hopefully. The executive session that was agendized as the second agenda executive session for this evening would be appropriate to also be rescheduled for the possibility of that session happening immediately after the session that we just voted on.
Are you suggesting we not go into the one that we might go into right now?
Correct, correct. I thought, anticipating that we may not talk about that until after the next executive session. I'm happy to go back into executive session on that topic at this point, if that's. I didn't understand that was the intent for this evening.
It would seem there'd be more information to talk about in an executive session after the one that was just moved. So I would be in favor of that too. And we could conclude this evening.
I'm kind of surprised by, well, we haven't seconded it yet, but I'm kind of surprised by that motion, so I'm considering it.
It wasn't a motion by me. I was just suggesting and would entertain a motion in that regard. If anybody was.
Yeah, Chris.
I did say so moved, yeah.
Okay.
Are we having discussion still?
Now I'm confused. Did we actually vote on that first executive session?
Yes. Didn't we, Amy?
That's what I thought we were at that point, so.
Right.
Can someone, before voting on something, remind me what I need to understand where we are right now.
I don't think we had a second, did we, Amy?
Not with this one, but we
Okay.
did with doing another executive session as soon as possible regarding personnel.
And we voted on that one. And now we're on to the second possibility, or as was suggested by Councilor Baxter, that Mayor Pro Tem Baxter, that we actually enter into that executive session this evening. My thought was that it would be more productive after this newly scheduled executive session.
I'm not making a suggestion either way, Dean. I was
Yeah.
just surprised by your motion, so that's all.
Okay.
But we have a motion on the floor without a second at this time.
And that motion, let's maybe reiterate the motion to see if truly is not a second. And that was a motion to enter into an executive session for the exact agendized purpose of this evening's second executive session to be rescheduled after our newly requested executive session.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm still confused. It is late for all of us. Are we just voting to put it on the agenda for sometime future, and then we would still then decide whether or not to go into executive session at that time? Or are we skipping a step and saying that, all right, it's already going to happen?
No, I think the idea, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your intent was to agendize it after the next executive session to be scheduled as soon as possible. I don't think you can decide now to go into executive session down the road. So I would suggest that it's for the purposes of just agendizing it at that point, and then you still could decide whether you wanted to go in or not at that point.
Tonight. Oh.
That's correct. No, that's correct. That is,
the only thing
that is accurate.
Yeah, okay. The only thing you're deciding right now is to put it on the agenda. So this would in effect create two agendaed, if that's a word, executive sessions as soon as possible. One, pursuant to your first motion, this one would effectively move the second executive session that was scheduled for tonight to that agenda after the other executive session that you just scheduled. This is confusing to talk about. So.
That is correct.
That is correct. Well stated, Derek. Well, much better than me. Thanks so much.
Which would in fact mean that you're not going to go, well, I guess it wouldn't mean that you still could vote on whether to go into the one that's scheduled tonight, right?
Correct.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I love the look on Amy's face, waiting for a second or not.
I need a second. Go once.
Could I suggest that it might make a little more sense if we voted whether or not to go into tonight or not, and then we voted on what to do next once would that be a little clearer? Because we still would have something hanging out there about, we would still have to decide whether or not we were going to go in tonight rather than just skipping over it.
Kind of what I was just saying earlier. Yeah.
Sure. Procedurally, I was under the impression that if we didn't enter into executive session, that we just didn't do it. But if we need to vote not to go into executive session this evening, then that may be procedurally the correct way to.
I hate to say this, but point of order is either it's died because of a lack of a second, or we have to have a second to have this discussion because we're a little out of order here. So
correct. Correct.
Just assume it died for lack of a second, or.
Okay. Yeah. Just want to make sure everybody understands what they're doing. So it has died for lack of a second. So I'd entertain a motion to move into executive session as was scheduled for this evening. And I will get that paperwork.
I'm happy to make that motion so we can get a vote.
Yeah.
You have to say all the fancy words, though.
There's a need for city cuts. Let's do it by the book. There's a need for the city council to meet in executive session for the purposes of conducting a conference with the city attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific questions related to the search and hiring process for a new city manager as allowed in CRS 24-6-4024B. State law requires 2/3 of a quorum present must vote in the affirmative in order to convene in executive session. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Well, we can have discussion, Dean, if we want to. That's the next step is there any discussion? And then a vote.
I realize that. So It's just getting late, and we will have discussion now. I don't hear any discussion, so I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Whoa. No.
That's a,
no?
you're on mute, Kim.
The motion is to go into executive session?
Correct, this evening.
Okay, so Melissa wants to go into executive session.
That's what I heard.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Bettine,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
No.
Mayor Brookie.
No. Motion fails. Do I hear another motion to, and that motion could be to have this same meeting follow the rescheduled the previous motion, the previous action of this evening to schedule and agendize an executive session for as soon as possible. And the content of this same executive session would be scheduled for immediately after that, if needed, and therefore it would be placed on the agenda and given at least 24-hour notice in posting such that we could have this conversation should it be necessary.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, maybe we have a roll call, please.
Counselor Bettine,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes, motion passes. And if we can direct staff to make that agenda, same content as what happened this evening. And with that, boy, I almost fell asleep there between the discussion and the roll call. I apologize. I absolutely apologize. So, but with that, I believe we've come to the conclusion of our regular city council meeting of August 18th, 2020. And unless there's any further discussion, wish you a good night and adjourn this meeting. Thanks so much.